I'm going to give a intro to all these great people. Start. Oh, no, he's lost his privilege. We'll start with Scott. Scott.
I am thank you for having me. I'm Scott from Fabian Liberty, anarcho-capitalist duo stream. We do a lot of news, politics, philosophy discussions, etc., and a lot of debates. However, this Thursday I'll be hosting a panel talking about critical gender theory, talking about gender and the trans experience, etc. Taftaj will be there. Blair White will be there.
wow.
Shifter of Shapes from Twitter will be there. Famous trans person. Tulibar, also Richie, which was the person that was retweeted by J.K. Rowling for his horrible vaginoplasty, will be there. And we're waiting on the schedule to see whether or not Buck Angel will be there. So you should definitely come and check it out.
Did we have
Thursday
Buck
at 8
Angel
p.m.
on? Did we have Buck Angel on their channel?
I know, because I interviewed Buck Angel and gave Doobie his contact.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, excuse me. All right. Well, I was gonna say I had a little back and forth with them. They were the cool person to talk to. But I'm very excited for you, Scott. Thanks.
Yes. So I just decided I wanted Keffels to come and cancel me. I guess I don't
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of fun. Everyone should check it out. Okay. So let's go to Corey. Corey, thank you as well for being here. How are you, friend?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much, as always, for inviting me. Always grateful. Super happy to be here, especially with returning panel members that I've been on previous panels with, and I think this is my first time with Ginger Moth on a panel. I could be wrong, even though I know you very well. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it. I'm Corey Campbell. You can find me at Pro Communism United. No, you can find me twitch.tv, Corey Campbell 84, and on Twitter and Instagram, literally, it's Corey Campbell.
Oh man, I hate to see countrymen fight. Let's go to Joe Lewis. Joe Lewis. Thank you for being around here. Joe, we haven't had you in a bit. Joe's a teacher, busy with stuff. But we've missed you, Joe. I've missed you, Joe. And it's nice to see you, and that your hair is sprouting. All the more.
Yeah, no, I'm trying. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me as always. I'll try to come when I can, but either way, good stuff. Good stuff. Glad to be here.
I'm really happy to have you here. It's been a while. Definitely miss you. Let's go to our friend Lactoid. Lactoid, thanks for stopping by. My man Lactoid. Always happy to have you around. How are you?
I'm doing great. No, thank you for inviting me. I'm always willing to take a moment to rail against China. It's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks. You can find me on Anti-Communism United, the better version, Anti-Communism United, on Discord and Twitch. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have this isn't the first time. I'm not sure if you've been on a closed panel at all up with us, Ginger. I know you've been on open panels, but
I have had one closed panel with you.
Maybe was it Amazon Lily? Maybe Small Council. I'm not sure. But we've definitely, I guess it's happening.
We have our resident streaming via an iPad
on the Reverie. Nice to see you once again.
Thank you.
I
don't really see her.
Tell me what about yourself.
Well, I'm sorry for the lighting quality. It's very difficult to find lighting that doesn't wash me out.
I wasn't gonna say it, but thank you for saying it. Okay.
But no, it's absolutely terrible. But one of my cats knocked over my normal lighting, and now repositioning to where it looks okay is a task. But I'm Ginger Emoth. I normally do panels and or video gaming plus cosplay. That about sums me up.
Okay. Scott, this lighting is how I usually experience white people. I can't tell them apart. So thank you so much. Sprouticus. Sprouticus, buddy. Thanks for stopping by once again.
Real quick, when you say that, is that because white people are so beautiful it just blinds you?
Yes, that's what I meant. Yes, thank you.
I appreciate it.
Spartacus, most handsome. Okay, Spartacus, how are you?
Hey, I appreciate it. So I'm Spartacus. You can find me on Twitch, Twitter at Spartacus. Been AFK for a minute, had a kidney stone, been hunting. All
Okay,
ups
sorry
and
to hear
downs. It's all good. But I am back. So I'm excited to be back. But you can find me at Twitch and Twitter at Spartacus, and on Wednesdays you can find me streaming D&D with a wonderful cast of Ginger over here, Stardust. We've got Wick. We've got Beckett, who is doing the game master role, and yeah, it's a fun time. So maybe you should go check that out on any of their channels, and yeah, it's a fun time.
Sounds like fun. Thanks so much. And yeah, sorry that you. We're having a rough time, Fred.
Oh no, it's good. It happens.
Yeah. That's like always fucking terrified me. I want no part of that. Okay. Let's go to our friend, our Dark Lord and Savior. Excuse me, Doobie. All right, a friend to none, master to all. Doobie, thanks for stopping by, buddy.
Kind of weird how that master just rolls off your lips so easily. Yeah, I'm Doobie. I run the politics server on Discord. Discord.gg/politics. That's me.
And absolutely fuckingly spam.
You say the best last.
I just can't believe that Doobie is so racist that he said that you had greasy lips. I'm offended.
Okay, I know what. What's going on? But Bam, thank you for also stopping by. Friend.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I haven't been on. I'm usually super busy on Mondays, but yeah, so I hadn't been able to be on here in a while. But super excited. Topic should be interesting.
Sorry, boys,
yeah,
I had
get into
to.
it.
And with the opinions you are having so far, you won't be here for a very long time to come. All right, let's start. Topic 1. Google has a rocky relationship with China. It has removed most of its services from the mainland. This is partly due to the censorship regulations that China imposes on all tech firms. But should Google have ever been expected to resist China's laws? Should companies always focus on maximizing profits, even if that means working with distasteful parties? And are the people of China worse off without Western services? So what inspired this is an article saying that Google Translate was removed, so like you can't access it in the Google, Chinese mainland, and like you can't access most of its services. Those things are gone. Google says it's doing it because it it doesn't want to be evil, I guess. It doesn't want to assist China. I have thoughts on Google and its track record on civil liberties. Should any of that matter? To a profit maximizing corporation? Was it foolish? And is it better just to try to give audiences in repressed regions access to Western services where they might possibly maybe find something that is normally disallowed? So I know we'll jump into it. Let's start with our friend Bam.
Ooh, I got to go back to back. Specifically with this, I think that people always we always try to frame these things in the easy, like the very simple overlay of like we're always maximizing profit, which is only true within a degree. It's not necessarily about profit today. It's about like businesses have to track things that relate to a long game, and I can understand why in the like long game it's beneficial for Google to decide that like, oh, okay, we're going to make some type of stance on our opinions on dealing with China. I'm sure this isn't going to be like a long-lasting, permanent move, but I think it makes sense for right now. I think that's one of the benefits of being such a large corporation is you can make decisions like this and still be extremely profitable. So, I don't think this is necessarily against Google's interest to do so.
Did you say my
we
name?
can't
Sorry,
hear
I
you.
didn't hear you.
Yeah, I said Scott. Mhm.
Yeah, my bad. Yeah, so in a free market, it is always the business's duties to make as much profit as possible for its shareholders, right? Because that is what society values, that is what people value. And in a free market, a truly free market, profit is just proper resource allocation and interest paid towards land and labor for products and services that people need. The problem is when you have a mixed market economy, sometimes what's best for profit is regulatory capture, working with companies that are doing things that are fraudulent or involve some form of theft or involve some sort of like kind of tipping the scales in one direction or another. And so when asked like, should a company maximize its profit? Well, they should always, to the best of their ability, assuming that that doesn't violate anybody else's rights. Now, Google has a really sketch history of working with China in the past, right? You know, they built search engines for them to censor. Obviously, Google censors their search engine here in America based upon political values that help the establishment and their own personal values. But they did the same thing in China. And of course, in 2010, China hacked them, stole their IP and pissed them off. And they said, well, we refuse to censor now, and got kicked out. You know, Google went in 2017, I believe, and built an AI lab. And of course, they pulled out in 2019. You know, Google did some work with Tencent, and of course, those deals fell through. So now Google's removing Translate, and you go, well, what's going on here? Well, the fact of the matter is that China's becoming less of a free market. They're stealing more. They're tipping the scales towards their own companies more. You know, they're having runs on the banks where they have training exercises to protect the money in the banks, right? And so I think what we're seeing isn't so much Google doing the right thing or, you know, trying to not be evil. They're just maximizing their profits like they've always been doing. And the cool thing about capitalism is the less capitalistic you get, you may get some short temporary gains, but eventually it doesn't work out in your favor. And this is why Google's pulling out, because it's no longer profitable for them to be there. It's not helping their business at all. It's just opening up vulnerabilities for them. I think it's hilarious and base that the Google Translate, when you click it, links to a Hong Kong website and then lets you know that that website's blocked. So then like mainland China people that attempt to use the product are like, oh, they have this freedom in Hong Kong. You just don't get it. Which I think is just hilarious. But like, ultimately, I would say, yes, it is in a business's interest to maximize profits, but you shouldn't do so in a way that violates other people's rights. That China obviously does that, but that ultimately the balance between free markets and mixed market economies, that the more socialistic an economy is, eventually that catches up with them. And the profit incentive kind of tends to go in the favor of not violating people's rights anyways. The two simply align at a certain point.
Thank you so much. So Corey, please.
Yeah, so I don't know that I have an exact firm position on this. That might just be due to ignorance, because I would say I'm not well versed in terms of like all of Google's dealings with China. Definitely probably not as well versed as Scott, since a lot of the information that Scott shared is new to me. What I would say is I think I overlap in terms of the sentiment of like, should companies maximize profits provided they don't violate human rights? I would say yes, I agree with that sentiment, but obviously I think Scott and I have very clear different definitions of rights. And I think that's more or less my bottom line, my guiding principle. But I'm more or less like, I'm open-minded and I'm willing to sort of like stake out a more, I guess, firm position based off what other actual panel members say. Because again, I'm pretty open, and I don't think
Google's done a lot of wild
Google.
shit.
And to answer sort of the question in the
I think you might be
prompt
thinking
of
of Project Dragonfly,
are
Roland.
the people of China worse off without Western services? As far as I can tell, but I'm far from an expert, I don't think so, because I think China is pretty much moving, or at least trying to move in the direction of being self-sufficient, based off of the article, based off of the information in the article. They already have their own translating service, and they already have their own search engines, etc. They are like, I think they're moving towards being self-sufficient, as far as I can tell. So I think they don't really care all that much about Western services. That's pretty much it so far.
So much, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, Google's going to do what it wants. I do think, generally speaking, companies are providing some type of service, and if they feel like certain actors are not going to use their services in a way that they feel is consistent with whatever they value, then I think it's totally fine for them to pull out. If I'm China in this case, it's just making sure the alternatives are available for citizens to use. It's a shame that we're at a position where pulling out of an ecosystem or pulling out of an area could be potentially really huge for a region, but I wish we were in a better position for that. But generally speaking, I think the long-term solution would be to make sure that the alternatives to Google are really solid so that people aren't like 100% relying on the services if Google were to decide to pull out for whatever reason.
Hey, thank you so much. Back to it.
So, I actually also have a problem with Google, and it kind of goes along with something I realized, and this is a tip also to everybody out there. If you're ever debating a left winger and you know that you've seen a study that just completely destroys their point, but you can't find it on Google, just switch over to Bing. And I promise you that if you put in the right keywords, you'll find it within a few seconds. I can't prove it. I'm convinced that Google is actively trying to censor like right-wing or libertarian positions here, because I've just noticed it again and again and again. Every single time, whenever I'm looking up anything that's controversial, that's not the left-wing perspective, I just simply can't find it. I can find it on Bing within a few seconds. So just a quick tip to everybody out there. Regardless of these issues, I'm going to praise Google here. I don't think Google or any companies of any Western countries should be doing business in China, or should be aligned with China, or should have investments in China. We are selling the bullets which will be used to shoot down the birds of liberty of the free peoples in this world. We are selling the bullets to our enemy. I think this is an example of a market failure. If a business makes money by engaging in an enterprise which promotes bad, such as selling guns to terrorists or providing economic expansion of communists, this business needs to be stopped in the name of global freedom and the sustainability of capitalism. I'm glad that Google did it willingly. I would be in favor of stopping, it would be difficult, but hopefully stopping all economic engagement with communist countries in this world.
Tell us how you really feel. Thank you so much, Lactoid. Let's go to Ginger.
Well, I kind of agree with Corey on this. I don't know whether it's just like maybe lack of knowledge on it or anything. I don't have a very firm stance on it. I don't feel like they are doing it for any charitable reason or any good reason. I'm sure they're doing it all for profit reason and for business purposes. Do I feel like they'll hinder themselves without us? No. I think that, like he said, that they're creating their own, they have their own Facebook type things, they have their own Twitter type things anyways. They've been censored from everything else. I don't think that Google Translate is going to be that big of a difference.
Spartacus.
So Google they're doing this for the face of it. They're doing this for the face of the value to try and have the people who want to use Google say, look, Google's doing a good thing. Google's pulling out of China. When the truth of it is that Google would be just fine staying in China if they were making money. But the truth of the matter is that Google's not making money in China. And they're moving out of China. They're
doing it for the truth or because they're not making money?
More money. And no, I don't think that companies have the right to just go around doing whatever they can to lift the bottom dollar. And an example I'll give for this is Mylan and Pfizer. When Mylan took over the distribution and the marketing for the EpiPen soared from $100 to $650 for an EpiPen. This severely hurt people that have anaphylactic shock when it comes to allergies, whether it be peanuts, bees, whatever it is you're allergic to. If you experience anaphylactic shock, an EpiPen is something that is needed to try and get you enough time to get to the hospital. And so no, I don't think that in all cases that a company trying to make more money should try to make more money. I think there are moral dilemmas to where the company has to go, this isn't the right choice because this is going to put people in a bad position. Now, when it's a very a luxury item, I don't see an issue with charging more money, but when it's something that's needed for the sustainment of life, then I do see an issue with a company deciding like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this just to make more money.
They didn't advertise it.
And last but not least, to be
Media did. I mean, I guess maybe they passed the
I
story
think
along to
that
the media.
what's interesting to me about this is that it's basically like seeing a clash between two competing overlords, right? In the culture war. You have China, who has a very obviously they have like their very specific set of preferences for how they'd like to see their culture develop. You have Google, who has their own very specific sets of preferences for how they'd like to see a culture develop. Like Lactode pointed out, Google definitely takes steps to censor some ideas, facts, ideologies, etc. All over the fucking internet, and it's beyond just like their search engine. They do this in everywhere. They have the ability to do this, right? All these tech companies do this. I mean, we just saw the Andrew Tate unpersoning happening. This also just happened to Sneeko, like yesterday, I think, or is it earlier today?
Earlier today.
So they do this not because they think these people are dangerous. It's because these people are conflicting with their worldview. So I think we need to kind of throw away the idea that Google is doing this because they're taking some principled position on censorship or freedom of speech or whatever the fuck. I don't think it's that at all. I think just China's worldview conflicts with their worldview, and so you have two people who'd like to, two sets of people that would like to brainwash the people in China, competing and conflicting, and that's what this is. Like, and I wonder if we're okay with that, right? So we can point to China and say, hey, China wants to censor all these ideas, and they want to censor these websites and et cetera, because they don't want their people to interact with things that they'd consider to be like a counterculture, or to be like to undermine their like authoritarian positions or whatever. But given that we have all these tech companies in the United States that do exactly the same thing, like it seems like the corporate overlord meme isn't like, it's not a meme anymore. It's a real fucking thing, and they're definitely exerting their influence on the culture. So I wonder how we can point the finger at China, like, hey, you're bad, you're terrible for doing this stuff, when the person that we're meant to be praising in the story is doing exactly the same shit here.
Interesting. Open to the panel.
I'm gonna agree. I'm gonna agree with Doobie that it's not this is not like some kind of moral, like, oh, we're gonna do this because it's the right thing. This is simply just playing it off as that they were losing money in China. They were losing money trying to compete in China. So they're pulling out of China. They're tired of the censorship they're having to do for China. They're tired of having to add all these extra things. It's costing Google money, and Google's tired of wasting their money on this when they could be focused on other things. So they're pulling out of China because of the monetary value that is outside of China is much more valuable than the restrictions they have inside of China. And they're trying to play it off as some kind of like moral good, as if they're doing this for the morals. They're not doing this for the morals. They're doing this because of the bottom dollar.
So I want to agree with Sproticus halfway. I don't know that they're necessarily advertising or like marketing that they're doing this for a moral good. I think they just did it. And, you know, they probably leaked it to the email so they could get some positive, leaked it to the press so they could get some positive press. But it's not like there's like commercials being run, like Google went out and said, like, for a better world, we stopped working with, you know, the Chinese censorship, or right? Like, I think they just did it. But like you said, because they're not making money. I think the biggest proof of this is probably Project Dragonfly, right? So even after 2010, when Google pulled out of their search engine, well, technically they didn't pull out, you know, a couple of Chinese companies. I think it was Baidu, you know, somehow magically got their IP after they were hacked by Chinese, and it pissed off Google. So Google said, well, okay, you want to fucking hack us? We're not going to censor anything. And then they were immediately kicked out. But from 2017 to 2019, they were working on Project Dragonfly, which was a group of specific people in-house that they tried to keep secret, that they were developing a search engine that would fit all of the parameters that the Chinese wanted. They abandoned that project, and they didn't abandon that project even when they got bad press. They abandoned that project later, right? So they doubled down by putting an AI research lab so that they could collaborate with the Chinese with DeepMind. And I think what they're realizing is that private property rights are being eroded further in China, towards the point where China is benefiting their own corporations and not respecting private property. And so they're not going to be able to make any money. And so that's why they're fucking pulling out, because the profit incentive isn't there, because China's becoming too totalitarian. They're not doing this because they give a fuck about Uyghurs or something, right? Like they're doing this because they're not making money, but lo and behold, it's the socialism that makes it difficult for them to make the money. So I want to say that. The second thing I want to say is Lactoid, Bing is actually the only search engine from the West that is still in China and specifically censors themselves for the Chinese government. Google and Yahoo have already left, etc. If you want to know whether or not something is censored on Google, a great way to test something, along with using Bing or Yandex or other, or DuckDuckGo or other search engines, DuckDuckGo admitted that they also sometimes censor, certain things. Go to Start Page, and what Start Page will do is it is still Google, but it doesn't have the algorithm based off of your IP address to select certain things for you, right? So sometimes things are censored on Google, and then sometimes things are censored, but they're not really censored. It's just giving you what it thinks it wants you to have based off of like what you click on the most. And so Start Page is a good way to kind of like reference those things.
Yeah, I want to ask also to follow up on that towards Lactoid. So you alluded to sort of just what Scott's outlined of like you seem to work under the assumption or the hypothesis that Google is censoring certain ideas. Like what do you count as censorship in that point? Because how do you know that it's just not a hit that's buried? Like, have you gone, when you search for something, do you go through 20, 30 pages deep? How's
that not censorship?
Yeah. So So first of all, I did not know Bing was active in China. That's disturbing and disappointing. I thought they're better than that. But sometimes
Microsoft always known to be the good guys.
Yeah. I know. Maybe it was a fucking pipe dream. I was like, oh look, they can do it. Why can't Google? Okay.
You wanted it, man. I'm sorry I had to do that to you.
Yeah,
you wanted it.
Santa Claus isn't real. I get it.
I know it sucks.
I have to deal with that. But I think when I'm typing in the exact search terms that I know should bring this up, and you bury it to the point where I'm 5 pages in and I can't find it, I think this is essentially censorship. Right?
But isn't that how Google this is just me thinking out loud, but based off isn't that how Google works? Of like
Corey.
Go ahead, Spartacus. Yeah.
You know that when Twitter specifically blocks people from like seeing your Twitter post, it's considered shadow banning. They're not banning you; they're just making sure you're not getting the reaction that you're used to getting. They are making it very hard to retrieve your content, and so it's considered shadow banning when they do that. Do you not consider the same thing for Google as to someone making it very, very hard for someone to get an actual source as to shadow banning that source?
Do you think Google's intentionally
can I answer, please, that question? So I think there's something, there's a difference, a clear difference in my mind between Twitter and Google, but also at the same time, it depends on what you're searching for, because if I'm searching for an academic article, I would never go to Google, just because the way they curate and their algorithm is just like totally different. And like, at least based off what I know of how Google works, like, it's curated content, and like what shows up at the top is not necessarily there's a reason why it shows up at the top, and it might be monetarily a monetary reason or whatever, and I don't know that it's censorship, or at least as far as I can tell.
So then you just don't know how to use Google. I can literally use quotation marks, which will put so the quotation marks in Google is supposed to give me the results with that exact phrase in it. And I would still be several pages deep before I find the exact source that I'm wanting, even though it has that in quotation marks, where it would show me other links that is similar to my quotation marks, right? But then like 5 pages deep, I find the source that has my exact quotation marks, which should have been way above the similar in quotation marks.
Yeah, and I can make the same argument for academic databases, and as far as I know, maybe I could be wrong, but academic databases like PubMed, JSTOR, SciFinder, they don't go. I wouldn't call that censorship.
Pause.
That just made it into the algorithm.
Google Scholar exists, right?
I don't really at least for my purposes, Google Scholar is not that great.
I mean, for your specific field, right? But if you're looking for general information and research that has a large amount of citations, so you can get an idea of like what the research states. Google Scholar is pretty much one of the best.
Yeah, depending on your like. This is
I was just throwing that out there. I was just like, I don't want to defend Google, like fuck Google, but like, I'm just saying Google Scholar is pretty good.
It sounds like a variation of the same thing that Corey just said, though. I don't know what that adds. But you were saying something about that, Corey. Like, why isn't Google Scholar good for you relative to your field?
Just because in terms of like this
Joe Lewis is
discipline that I'm in,
such a weirdo.
and the type of topics that I mentioned, like Google Scholar is just like not that great. That's all. But it's
okay.
Just for me personally, and my specific field, the biological sciences, like the PubMed and SciFinder is way more useful for me.
Bam, you were going to push back on something, and then I also do want to jump on Doobie's point. I thought Doobie had an interesting point at the start. But Bam, you want to say something before?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that I think they have like 2,000 different factors into their algorithm. Like it was some ridiculous number, but like I feel like we're dealing with like kind of conspiracy stuff, because I think the biggest factors in something is when you search something is one, how many people who search this thing up have like used this link in the last 30 days. How, like I said, some level of relevance to the topic that you displayed, and then there's certain websites that are considered that are just going to be listed higher in Google because of the type of website it is. Like if you're CNN.com is going to be, if you're looking for something, CNN probably going to be higher on the thing, and not because it's a left-wing source, but just because it's like a major news website. Like yeah, and like I said, there's a bunch of other factors, but I feel like that's the three of the main things that's targeted into anything you Google, like because it's just more useful that way versus saying like I want to find this niche. Like I can understand it can be hard to find a niche thing that like you and 20 other people with tinfoil hats have found useful to look at. Like that's just not what the average person would be looking for when they search.
So what you're saying is it's curated content that is a form of censorship because you think you're getting a search algorithm.
He'll mess up lactoids there. He won't have it. Go ahead, Sprout.
CNN's ratings has consistently gone down. Less people are clicking on CNN links. Less people are watching CNN on TV. Their ratings have consistently gone down, but yet it is still one of the first sources you'll see when you look something up on Google. There's been several times, I can't name exact times, but there's been several times that I've intentionally tried to see how long it took me to get Fox News. It was 3 full scrolls over on news for me to see Fox News. I'm not saying I agree with Fox News, but what I'm saying is Fox News is a very big news corporation in America, and for a very big news corporation in America to be 3 swipes over, that's absolutely insane. That you're going to show me all the other things, but you're three swipes over, and now I hit my first Fox News article.
For what topic?
I also want to point out that Fox News
it was just general topics. I'm not saying I agree with Fox News, but what I was intentionally trying to see where Fox News was, and it took me 3 swipes to get there.
I'm saying, you think I can't search something right now when Fox News come up as the first
it's not going to be the first one, no.
I mean, you do realize, as far as like it's censored by whatever country and language. Like when you're putting in Google, like I'm sure you're not getting articles. You're getting United States or largely American or United States, North American content, or whatever Western content. So I mean, is that censorship to you, Lactoid?
Well, no, I mean, like, I don't know why we're debating whether or not Google censors, because this is like just a known fact at this point. This is silly and stupid, but like, for example, Steven Crowder did a whole thing where, he would Google himself, and certain videos that he had put out could not find them. But when he went to other countries that he wasn't in throughout all of Europe, he could find them because it was specifically censoring his videos, even when he was typing in the exact title of the video in the United States, but wasn't in other places. Like this, like I find this silly and stupid that anyone like just accept it. Everybody knows we this is already just a fact of reality. I don't understand why we're getting like the topic is about China, and it seems like people don't want to have that conversation. They want to argue about something that everybody already knows is true. Which is that Google has a curation bias. Yeah, I'm not arguing about the intention of it. I'm saying that there's a bias of some sort, that the results are that like conservative and libertarian views, despite how popular they may or may not be, are much harder to find, and that information is much more difficult to find than left-wing sources, even when you have a search, when you put in keywords that should give you the exact thing you're looking for. They're hidden behind tons of other stuff. It's just silly.
He's right. I mean, and this is like an obscure reference, but I mean, it really hits home because try and I know everybody's going to be irritated, but try to look up Cozy TV on Google, and it will not come up unless you put Cozy TV Nick Fuentes.
So
I don't need the FBI seeing me searching that, you know.
But here's the thing. I googled Trump. That's literally what I googled. I just googled Trump.
You got Trump card as your answer?
Well, no, I'm now on the 14th page, and I still haven't seen one article from Fox News. I'm now on the 15th page, and I've still not seen one article from Fox News.
Well, the funny thing is that the Reuters, AP, and Fox are the only three major media publications in America that have their own wire, right? So like you would think it would bias and favor Fox News over any other mainstream media outlet just by virtue of the popularity, which crushes all of the other people's numbers, and the fact that they have their own wire. So they tend to be the first to report on things, and CNN, MSNBC, ABC, etc., tend to pull their news from Fox because they have their own fucking wire. So like the idea that Fox shouldn't be one of the first things that pops up is just hilarious. Now, again, Sproutacus, I would say maybe check Start Page, because it might just be that you tend to click links from CNN, MSNBC,
That's
ABC
possible.
before, and like Start Page will give you more of an idea of just like what Google is in general, as opposed to like what is curated for you. But I mean, even that is kind of like problematic, I think, if Google is like curating the news for you, even if that's not censorship, you could see how like that could lead to echo chambers and problems.
So, I mean, I guess on Start Page, I see it in the first page. It's like, it's 6 down. But like on Google, like it's I'm on the 22nd page and it's nowhere to be found. There's no more than 22 pages. Like I literally looked it up on Google. There's no Fox News articles regarding that.
Yeah, I mean, like, but okay. So, yeah, Google has its preferences. Like we can see this on YouTube, where previously independent news sites or channels were growing exponentially because they were popular. They had people coming to them, and on all sides of the spectrum. But then Google made a change and privileged established news sources like CNN, NBC.
The term
and
is authoritative sources. That's what they call it.
Authoritative, yes. Thank you for that.
People who can
Authoritative sources.
consistently get it wrong are authoritative. Yeah.
All of a sudden, their views shot up, right? And then others their channels just wouldn't grow, right? People who had been doing it for years, all of a sudden there was you could see a graph, and the new followers went off a cliff, because that's just what YouTube/Google decided to do. But then this all gets to our friend Doobie, who made a point at the very start, talking about, okay, if we've established, and we just have, that Google has some level of censorship, is it any different from China doing that, right? China very publicly, right, has the great firewall of China, and they block out content they find objectionable. If they're doing it, is China so bad?
I mean, China's at least being public about it.
Probably not in China.
And if I could actually ask or clarify Lactoid's position, because based off your opening statement, which you said earlier, it seems like you want pretty much all whatever Western companies to have no dealings at all with China. You want them to very much be isolated. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I think China's worse than Google. Going back on my talking about the point a little bit. A lot of it is just based on. I've been looking up some stuff while we've been talking. There seems to be some evidence to suggest that it's true. They were fined by the EU in 2018 for manipulating search results, billions and billions of dollars. They have blacklists. They're doing all this stuff, and for me, it just seems so consistent that every time I'm discussing something with somebody, and I cannot find something on Google well, hold on, like this is a topic in which I'm representing a right-wing position. I have to use a different search engine. Oh wow, first page, right? And so this is useful to me. I'm going to keep doing that because it serves utility, and I would suggest that other people do it too. As to China being worse than Google, yeah, I think this is inarguable, right? However frustrated I am with Google, I mean, here we have a state actor that represents 1.4 billion people, that censors to a far greater degree than Google does, right? Censors anything that challenges the state regime. And they have an army behind the central ruling Communist Party. The army is actually not loyal to the country of China. That's an interesting little factoid. They're loyal to the party. So it'd be like if the US military wasn't loyal to the country, it was loyal to like the Democrats. That's the comparison here, how crazy it is over there. But and not only do they have a military, not only are they a state actor hell-bent on global expansion and authoritarian control, but they've also demonstrated I think when they do get control, some very disturbing tendencies about what they do to their civilian populations that are I think in every way just makes them worse. This is not comparable. So do I think that we should ban Western countries from dealing with Google? No, I don't think they're a threat to global liberty in the same way I think China is. And by doing business with China, really any company doing business with China, I think we're selling them. There's a saying that I hear from leftists sometimes, like we're going to sell, we're going to make them. The capitalists are going to sell us the rope that we're going to use to hang them, and it's a horrible saying, right? Because it's disgusting. But I think with China, I feel like we're doing that, right? We are selling them the bullets that they're going to use against us. We're selling them the power that they're using to destroy us. Why are we doing this? Why are we okay with doing this?
Well, as far as I can tell, at least my understanding is like when many Western, like for example, take Hollywood. They can't really afford to not do business with China. Like China's now a huge, I think the biggest market for them now for movies. Same thing with I think a lot of gaming companies. They just can't afford to not do business with China if they want to compete on a global stage. Because China's starting to make movies, and it's only recently that China's and other countries are like breaking through and in some aspects like surpassing Hollywood. And like so it's like if they want to compete and it seems like you're all about competition, then it's like you can't afford to not do business with China.
Well, that's the shame, right? I mean, if it actually is the case that, and this is where I do think government intervention is justified, right? Like preventing people from doing business with communists, I think that is one of the few prerogatives that the government has here. We can't keep doing this. And the terrifying thing is, if we don't have enough power to convince the other Western powers to go along with us and stop selling China the bullets they're going to use against us all, maybe we are sort of on a downward track to oblivion. I don't know how we're going to stop it. There needs to be a significant political.
Yeah, you're advocating for the state. That's
the state to stop in the same way that I think it should be illegal to sell guns and bombs to Al Qaeda. I think it should also be illegal to sell anything to China.
Or release a movie in China.
Yeah, anything.
Okay.
I don't know.
Hold on. Can I Corey? So recently there was a scan. I don't know if I should call it a scan.
I have to think about that.
Some hubbub. I'm gonna call it hubbub over the Star Wars film. That when it was released in China, they took the black guy off of the main character group and put him off in the corner, right? Because Chinese people don't like black people; they're very racist, and they did this specifically for the Chinese market, right? So you're laughing about this as if it's no big deal, but
no,
I think
agree
what I'm kind of curious is that something that you're okay with happening? You're okay with companies doing this in a shrewd decision, to go after profit in a really fucked up country? Is that what you're saying?
No. I find it interesting, just that I'm totally not okay with those things. And I'm for pretty much limiting business with China because I think human rights and ethics should be a more guiding principle. But here is where I guess Lactoid and I will overlap. That requires state intervention. And I guess we have some common ground there.
It might, right? I wish it didn't. And if there is a way. Scott talked a little bit about how for certain businesses it's just not profitable to operate in China. I think that's great. I love it when the communists shoot themselves in the foot. That's perfect. But in the situations in which we can't rely on that, that's what I'm concerned about now. I get concerned, and we already do this all the time when it comes to certain technologies, right? We're not openly selling rocket technologies to the Chinese, right? SpaceX is not allowed to do business with China in the same way they're allowed to do business with certain countries in Europe or with other companies in America. because they're selling weapons grade technology, right? They're working with weapons grade technology. Same reason why weapons companies, weapon manufacturers in the US are limited with who they can do business with, because the idea is we don't want to sell these people something that they're going to use against us. But the issue with this is, I think it's great that we do it with the industries where it's clear, but for decades now, for really 2 decades specifically, China has grown from being almost nothing to a threat, a serious threat. Yeah, a serious threat to everybody. And this is the thing where there's some bipartisan.
That's what we said about Russia. That's what we said about Russia.
And
Ukraine is kicking Russia's ass. Ukraine is kicking Russia's ass. And that's what we said about Russia.
There's still a body count associated with this.
We piped Russia. I understand there's a body count, but we piped Russia up way too much. If Ukraine is able to do that against Russia, like Russia is nothing at this point. And so I'm very hard to believe that China's all of a sudden become this gigantic force that we need to deal with. Take aside nuclear weapons. Take aside nuclear weapons from Russia. Russia isn't shit. Take aside nuclear weapons from China. China's not shit either.
Germany right now is paying the price for not heeding the warnings of being economically interconnected with Russia, right? France did the right thing. They were like, we're just gonna go nuclear power. We're gonna do our own shit. We're not gonna like intertwine ourselves with this authoritarian shithole. And they were good, right? They, props to them. Germany didn't listen, and now natural gas is being used as leverage to advance Russia's interest in Ukraine. The idea that China wouldn't do this or wouldn't do something similar when it comes to their national interests, which are obviously imperialistic as well. I mean, think about it. Think how closely our economies are interconnected, right? We just can't deal with them anymore. pull everything out.
But now we can't, at least as far as we can't afford not to, because they're just that would probably just make them stronger in some sense, or like that would erode.
So there's a quote. There's a
you go first, Scott.
That we don't know if it actually came from Bastiat. It might just be attributed to him. But I think it kind of adequately expresses my issues with Lactoid's proposal to like use the state to stop the business with China. And that's when goods don't cross borders, soldiers will. Right? The fact that China is economically dependent upon us and upon the consumer market as well, and like grabs raw resources and like manufactures a lot of things, and we consume a lot of those things. It does present issues to us, our economy. It's certainly a threat in some ways, but the idea that you're going to stop all of that, you essentially isolate China in such a degree that it massively emboldens them to gobble up Malaysia, gobble up Laos, gobble up Vietnam, continue the Beltway Initiative in Africa, and really start to create like a competing empire situation here. So while I do understand that they are horrible state actors that violate rights regularly, I don't know that the appropriate solution to it is to ban companies from doing it. I think the appropriate solution is more freedom, and especially here in the West, so that we can economically outcompete them, as opposed to regulation that forces those jobs into Chinese hands. One of those would be like the minimum wage, for example.
Maybe, sure, and we're not going to disagree on a lot of that stuff, Scott. But maybe this is an issue of we have to do it slowly, and it's got to be progressive here. But are you in favor of relaxing the current bans that prevent U.S. companies from selling weapons technology to China?
Right now, this is a tricky question because, less state regulation is something I'm morally forced to support. It's not the first thing I would do, right? It's not the first thing, but I would have to bite the bullet that I would be okay with that. The only way that I would be okay with that is that if it doesn't exacerbate another violation, which is all of the tax money that is being spent to support said companies. So the only way that I would support that is if the Pentagon and the DoD and the taxpayers stop spending the hundreds of billions of dollars to prop up these companies in the first place. If it was a totally free market enterprise, then yeah, sure. I would say they could sell to whoever the fuck they want to sell their technology.
Wouldn't that just encourage them to sell more to China?
Because
Or
they
be
have
okay with
their
that.
enemies in the United States?
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
What would
But
your
first,
choice
but
be
first we have
then?
to stop. My first and only choice would that we would have to stop funding them with taxpayer money first. So long as we're taxpayer funding these companies, then no. But if we're giving them specific contracts, like one of the ones that I love to bring up all the time is the ACC Picatinny deal, where it's $350 million that the Pentagon gave to a lot of these companies so that they could supply arms and munitions to rebel groups in the Middle East and North Africa, which is still currently happening, so that we can have more war and conflict so they can make more money, right? Like if you stop all of that funding, I don't really see an issue with any weapons manufacturer selling guns to anybody.
Wait, but and I think that them not having the funding and then also not being banned from selling overseas to our enemies.
They will sell to the Chinese.
Or the North
I don't care.
Koreans
Free
or
market, baby.
someone else.
I don't care.
Okay. Well, maybe this like represents a difference. I care.
They
care
sell
about,
weapons. They sell
China.
weapons to the Chinese. The Chinese were gonna fucking steal anyways, and we get money for it, and our economy does better. Wing bang, like thanks, awesome. We fucking come out ahead from where we're already sitting.
So you think
As if
you-
Chinese
so-
company-
North Korea,
you
like
think- wait,
ICBMs that actually work.
You think that
And
you think the
now we need to
Chinese
deal with like North Korea able to send a nuke to the United States or
think
or
the
able to project
Chinese-
their force across the world?
you think the
that
Chinese
seems
government should have
interesting.
American technology in their military?
Do I think the Chinese government should have American technology? No,
Yes.
because I don't think the Chinese government should exist.
Okay, so
I'm an
why
anarchist.
Why are you supporting the selling of American technology to China?
Because I'm not a consequentialist. I'm worried about what rights are being violated.
Yeah, it's just that
Morally, he has to agree to that because that's his moral framework.
So even
as
if you had
far as
like
I-
an expansionist fascist dictatorship, you'd
Do
probably
you have
still
any idea
say, hey,
how
maybe we should stop
wildly
them.
Do you have any idea how wildly different the American economy and state would be if first we dismantled all taxpayer funds towards weapons manufacturers? Like you're talking a
wouldn't
completely
exist so
different
much then.
world in that point. No, there'd be
Yeah,
private
I think a
enterprise.
much worse one.
Yeah, I know, because you're a fucking fascist.
And then all these companies that we've
What do you-
funded in the United
Duh.
States ship their missiles and shit overseas to our enemies who want to come and take pieces of the United States away because we're no longer a functioning country. Like that seems like a bad idea.
Well, I know to a fascist who's made nothing but fascistic beliefs present here over and over and over and over again. Every time we have a panel,
Sure.
I understand why you don't want a weakening of the prison military industrial complex. I personally
not
do.
true.
Scott,
Hold
I
on.
don't know. I don't know if this.
I
is
don't
like a
know, it's
topic
just like-
that's
So-
fascist, right?
So
I mean,
should we sell U.S.
I'm not saying
technology
that
to-
specific
Wait,
thing is fascist.
To be super
I'm saying
clear, I am a
obviously it
fascist.
sounds
Scott,
bad to a
I
fascist.
am a
Scott, I'm trying
super
to figure this out.
authoritarian
Oh, sorry,
nationalist.
sorry,
I'm
sorry.
absolutely a fascist.
I'm trying to figure this out. So Scott, do you think that the American companies that produce American technology for our military, do you think they should be selling that same technology to the Taliban run Afghanistan?
No, I don't think they should.
So-
Should is an odd question. What the original question was
should they be
would
allowed
I
to?
support deregulation of businesses selling things? And I said the only way that I would support said deregulation is if we completely decoupled the taxpayer from these. I think
So you would-
businesses should
so
be
you would
allowed to
allow
buy
that,
and
though?
sell to. Yes.
So you would allow?
I'm a
you
fucking
would
anarchist.
allow-
How is this surprising to you? Get it through your thick fucking skull. I'm not lying when I say I'm an anarchist.
I agree with that.
So he's
I
not
appreciate
like I say, he's not a consequentialist. So he's not really thinking about the terrible consequences of his shitty ideology.
well, so
I don't think you're thinking about the wonderful consequences of finally destroying the prison military industrial complex in America.
okay, so like libertarianism is a big tent party. Okay, Scott, I respectfully disagree. I think the idea of selling communists the weapons that they intend to use against us is bad policy for a couple of reasons.
What if their weapons are lollipops?
Yeah, I maybe it's a little bit consequentialist to me, but like, in the same way that we can break it down to like an individual level, right? If I walk up to somebody who's shaking and saying, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to kill him. And then I pull out a handgun and I say, hey, $100, here you go.
What if it's a lollipop they pull out?
Or a gun that shoots lollipops.
Yeah.
What if it's
I-
like
now
a
we're talking.
pedo and he needs a lollipop to lure over a child, right?
All right,
You know
all right,
he's
all right.
gonna
There's
use
no
it for
Mr.
that.
Girl fans anymore. They're all.
No, I'm just
made up
wondering,
their
like,
own
so
different
you know
websites.
he's going to use it for that. Like, would you still sell it to him?
What?
You can't be an accomplice. Like there's a level in which there's a legal level.
Why
in
would
which
I?
you become
Why
an
would I sell
accomplice to a
candy
crime.
to a fucking pedo? Like I would try and stop the pedo.
Why
What a
would
dumb
you
question.
sell fucking missiles to China?
I never said that
why
I
would-
would.
But you'd allow them to do it. Okay, so you wouldn't personally sell the candy,
exactly.
but you'd allow the guy standing next to you to do it, so long as you didn't touch it.
I wouldn't fucking allow. We would be going after the pedo because the pedo is a fucking evil, horrible person. But yes, if
Wait,
someone
but
wants to
don't you
sell
know, like,
candy,
states, how
I'm
you
not going to
supposed
make
to go
candy
after-
illegal because a fucking pedo in a van might
You just
buy
say, hey,
candy.
You can't sell candy to pedophiles if you know they're going to use it to lure children into their house. Like, it seems pretty straightforward.
Look, Doobie, we've gone down this rabbit hole before of like where you randomly and arbitrarily make laws, right? The fact of the matter is that people are either free to engage in voluntary transactions and associations, or they aren't. I am
Yeah,
for the
they're
freedom to
obviously-
engage in voluntary transactions.
And
Now,
I think like
do I
most
think one
reasonable people
should
are for having
sell
restrictions
candy to a
around
fucking pedo.
when they can do that.
No, we'd be going after pedos. Pedos are criminals. The non-aggression principle doesn't apply to them. Why? Because they violated the non-aggression principle. They're
Wait, but
criminals.
don't you need a state to go after pedos then?
What? No.
Then how do you go after them?
Wait, okay, maybe this is like too okay. So what if I sell ropes?
You think
right?
you
That's
think
my
it's
job.
impossible? You think it's impossible
Let's say
for a
I
pedo to be
sell
found in
ropes
Tehran?
or like duct tape and shit, right?
I mean, without a state, maybe.
and the guy comes into the store and he's like,
This is
"Hey, I need
stupid.
some rope and duct tape, and I know this man is a pedophile, right?
Mhm.
I'm not taking part in any kind of pedophilia, or I'm not going to help him go track down the child, but I know he's probably going to use this to track down the child and hurt the child, right? So you said that I shouldn't face some kind of consequence for selling him this thing that I know he's going to use to hurt another person?
I think you're a piece of shit. I think other people shouldn't do business with you. I think people should ostracize you. But I think engaging in a voluntary transaction there's nothing wrong with that. Now, the pedo, we should go and hunt down.
Without a state, right?
I see.
Joe, like, if you want me to crush the ever-loving shit out of you on anarchism, we can do that,
tell
but
me
I don't
more,
think it
baby.
has much to do about Google censorship in China. Like, if you want me to take over the panel and explain rights enforcement agencies and the structures of hierarchy and the non-aggression principle, like, I can do that, but it's just going to become the Fabian
Okay.
Liberty show. Like,
Sure.
it's
I mean,
going to be silly.
That's not it. That's not it now.
What?
I mean, it's not. I mean, it's not. Is that not what's happening right now? But okay,
Well,
all right. I'm
what's
good.
happening right now is Fabian has been brave enough to set down his flagpole, right? And because none of the
Mhm.
lefties on this panel are speaking out against China or in favor of China or whatever, we're now forced into Fabian's playpen to talk about anarchism again. So unless you guys would like to set out a flag of
it's
your
not
own, for
my
us to
fault
attack-
that like they're fucking just sitting there quietly, like,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
know.
know which side I'm on, and like fucking you ask me a question about my philosophy, I'm
this.
going to
I don't know
answer.
if- I don't know if that is a.
I mean, I just,
Just
I
get out of
feel
position.
like
Set
it's
my
weird that we have to,
side.
I don't defend China, but I don't think it's because of communism. That's why I've kind of been like, I don't consider China to be a communist country, and that feels like a boring line to go down.
Why is China not a communist country?
That's the boring line. I don't feel like going down. That was why quiet was preferable. Like I think that by every standard of the.
Well, Bam, do you think American companies should be?
Well,
able
you
to
made
do
the
business
statement
in China?
now, like.
Oh wow, super far.
Yeah, but Bam, Doopy's question. Do you think American companies should do business in China?
Not just like should they do it? Should they be allowed to do it?
Right.
Be careful. I saw you wearing Nikes one day, Bam. You might be walking
Right.
into a trap here. Okay.
Literally.
Why do you think I wear Adidas?
Because, I know. Yeah, I like cheap shoes and.
Oh yeah, true.
A true capitalist.
This is
Stay quiet, brother.
So unironically, I think this demonstrates the market failure. This demonstrates why we are selling ourselves into death, into slavery, right?
No, fuck you.
We are.
That's not a market failure. Stop
Tell
using
Kevin Durant
economic
to make
terms
nicer
improperly.
shoes, bro.
A market failure is supposed, even though I don't believe in the existence of them, to only exist on a free market. When you are talking about state issues and the state's involvement in the market, it is not a market failure in any way, shape, or form.
So I'm talking about not necessarily in terms of the decision of state actors. I guess the state's buying the guns or buying the industry because that's what they do.
Yeah, it's socialism. It's not a market failure.
I'm talking about the fact that companies willingly choose to do this because it's good to make money, and the fact that we have a profit incentive here for something that will undermine the very foundation of capitalism. It's self-defeating, right? It is, in my opinion, it's a self-defeating. You're setting yourself up for failure.
Well,
Yeah,
actually,
there's a market
here's the
incentive
other
to
part of that, like,
promote communism, to give money to
being real
communism.
black.
Yeah, and I thought this is like the same thing on Twitch. Same
That's
thing on
not a
Twitch
market
and Google,
failure.
right? There's a market incentive to support communists, and it's no problem.
Again,
That's not true. No one follows Mal on
just
Twitter.
like 12 seconds of actual thing. Like I think it's actually really beneficial for the globe as a whole, for the United States and China to be so tied to our trades. Like China or America being like isolationist is good for no one. I'm a really big believer in multilateral trade agreements, and I'm a really big believer in like the global economy and everyone being connected in some way. Even China.
I think Google is proving that wrong, right? I think as China becomes more authoritarian, it's not profitable or good for Google to be there. And I think that's probably true of most businesses. The problem that I fear is that, the entire point of profit, right, in an evenly rotating economy is just interest paid for land and labor because, people prefer things now as opposed to the same thing later, right? So you get paid profit because you have the capital to invest to give those goods and services to people right now. And when we aren't in an evenly rotating economy, proper resource allocation is also the reward for it. Profit is the reward for that. And I think it's bad resource allocation to be doing any business in China right now. I think it's a dumb move for short-term gains that will ultimately defeat your company if you're consistently doing business in a country that's getting exceedingly more aggressive and exceedingly more abusive towards private property rights. That being said, the fear that I have is that we're not in a capitalist nation. Instead, we're in a mixed market economy with socialism. And I worry that companies know that they can stay here until it collapses and the American taxpayer will bail them out. That's what really scares me, is that just like the 2009 financial collapse, where they were engaging in corrupt bullshit, they knew at the end of the day that the taxpayer would be there to pick up the pieces from their horrible business practices. And so ultimately, I think if we were more capitalistic, we would probably not be in China, because it's a bad idea for most businesses to be there. There's no reason we can't be making shoes in Bangladesh, right? Like, they're already set up for the ready-made garment industry. There are plenty of places that you could be doing this business that aren't in an increasingly abusive and authoritarian state, such as China. So I think if they continue down this path, I don't want to say that the problem will necessarily fix itself, but I think you will see more divestment from China, which may kind of increase the behavior and tendencies of the CCP.
I hope you're right, because I think that's the only realistic solution here. I don't think we're going to be banning all trade from China anytime soon. I don't think the rest of the world would follow us. Even if we did, I think we could make some progress when it comes to, tariffs against China, like we saw during the trade war, or, certain industries being banned. I think, again, as any kind of restrictions against business with, communist authoritarian countries, I actually do support. But if you're right, and then just over the long term, this problem is going to solve itself. I mean, that's the best kind of problem. Google doesn't want to do business in China anymore. Let's say, next year, Nike doesn't want to do business in China anymore either. I'll be more than happy at that for the problem to solve itself. I'm just concerned if it doesn't.
I just don't understand. Like, I'm just super milquetoast liberal, and even I get annoyed by this authoritarian communist comment. Like,
that's not true, man. I've seen you in Clubhouse.
They're putting people in camps, and they're making them work in Xinjiang, and it's terrifying, and we're funding it.
I think those things are bad. I don't understand why you have to be like.
So okay,
this is the second time you've been like, they're not really communists, and you won't defend it.
I want to go to this thought. Like, so a lot of the thinking from the American political system when we opened up trade with China was that, yeah, they're bad. They're doing awful things. But it is the trade, the contact with the West that will change them, right?
Moderating force.
Yeah, exactly that. Moderating force that we will have on them, right? They through trade, through getting our goods, through getting our media, they will experience the superiority of our culture, of our way of life, and whether they actually have a revolution or not, that's something different. But at the very least, it would have an effect on China and move them to a less extreme positions. That seems to not have been the case, at least far as I can tell. And it seems to be that we end up undermining ourselves. So, like, in terms of our values, right? Like, businesses, especially when it comes to money, businesses will choose profit over anything else. And so, while they might speak here, they'll run an ad here about how they love, I don't know, fucking diversity or free speech or whatever the fuck, right? When they go over to China, the money's just too good. It's just too good. So it seems like we are undermining ourselves by doing business with China. Do people agree with that? That, like,
yeah, I absolutely.
I think this.
You could even say
this is what happens when you have socialism in the economy. Like when you have socialism in the economy, you interject high time preference into economic affairs. If the more capitalist we were, the more capitalist. If we were more capitalist, we would be doing less business in China. The fact of the matter is that regulatory capture, it makes perfect sense because the entire idea behind profit is just like I said, it's proper resource allocation and interest. But the more socialism that you interject into an economy, the more that regulatory capture is a means of making profit, the more of utilizing state power. One of the big reasons that people move over their manufacturing to China is because of the minimum wage laws. If we didn't have a minimum wage laws, we could just as easily have cheap factories on the southern fucking border where individuals were making $2 an hour, and we wouldn't have to ship shit over to fucking China.
So wait, so I have a question.
Oh God. I'm really curious as to how having less socialism in the economy or being more capitalist will fix this thing that I'm about to bring up.
Well, that's the question I was going to ask because I'm trying to find the socialism.
You could see this is like, I'm sure there's more there's early examples right that are out there, but the thing that I remember seeing first was Fight Club. Well, Fight Club was released in China, right? Rather than having the ending where all the fucking buildings blow up, right, and they win, quote unquote. Rather than having explosion, there's like a screen where text comes up, says, "Hey, the police found everybody. You know, they put a stop to the plot. Nothing exploded, and he ended up in a psychiatric hospital getting medication, whatever." Right. So they totally fucking wipe out the ending of Fight Club. So how does being more capitalist or less socialist in the United States fix that issue, which is a company saying, "Hey, we want to release this money in China because it's going to make us money. To do that, we need to undermine the fucking point of the movie, right? And in some way, American values, right? So we're going to do it because we want the profit." Like, how does having less socialism or more capitalism address that?
Okay, so you want me to draw a line between less socialism in our economy to how would Fight Club not be censored in China? I can take a guess. Right? I mean, like I can take a guess at it. So if we had less socialism,
I think that's what Prime's talking about. Because rather than them adjusting their culture to come closer to ours, we're actually moving closer to theirs in a lot of ways.
The Western values.
And one of the reasons. Right. And one of the reasons is because of the socialistic tendencies of our economy. So if we had a less regulated, more free economy, China would have less business, right? Would you agree to that or disagree to that?
China would have less what?
Business in general, because they'd have less manufacturing. If, let's say, we just got rid of the minimum wage.
Sure.
Let's just get rid of the minimum wage.
Yeah.
Right. We get rid of the minimum wage. We can have cheap factories, more jobs in America, more high paying jobs, as well as more low paying jobs, and a better immigration policy on our southern border. Right now, because there's less manufacturing in China, in order to do trade, they're going to have to become more capitalistic. They're going to have to compete on a more even playing field. And one of the reasons why they get so much money from America and they're able to maintain this authoritarianism, which is a net drain on the economy, is because of the corruption of our economic systems. Again, if we had less, let's say, environmental regulations like cap and trade in the UK, where they wanted to fix the amount of carbon that they had in the environment, but the only thing they did is put a bunch of regulations on their own businesses and then buy shit from China, which actually increased their net carbon. Again, China would have less business. So the less business that China has and the less they're able to take advantage of these situations, the more capitalistic, the more free market, and the more libertarian they would have to become. And so if they were forced to become more libertarian and more free market, their values would, of course, and their culture would, of course, have to adapt to these changes as well. And so I think you would see less authoritarian government control over the population's culture as well as those borders open, as more free market capitalism occurs. And because of this, there would be less censorship by the state towards its culture because it would embrace this change, as opposed to utilizing our own socialist weaknesses in our economy against us for their own profit and gain. So that would be like just a bit of a wager or a guess.
What do you think is the biggest socialist weakness in the United States currently that capitalism could solve?
The worst one?
The biggest for you.
Probably taxation. Just taxation and wealth
Okay,
distribution
really
in
quick,
general.
I feel like I need to respond to Scott because he laid out a whole thing. And I just want to say that actually, I think what's happened is you were going back a step further than I was, and I think you're correct. I think if I were to look at it from that framework, right, where we took away their economic power by attracting the manufacturing jobs back to the United States, so they didn't really have that to lean on, they will need to adjust their economy, and that makes sense. Okay, you're right. You win.
It'd be a down for the citizens of America though if we just abolish the minimum wage and people are working for $2 an hour.
Why?
If they choose to do that, like why not?
Yeah.
Because $2 an hour is not livable in the United States. Do you think it's livable in the United States?
They shouldn't agree to do that.
Then don't agree.
I agree, but I agree, but when you force someone by all the corporations that have this certain type of job at $2 an hour, and no one's above $2 an hour, and they don't really apply for any other job because they don't qualify for any other job, then they're forced to take a $2 an hour job, right?
Sounds like they need to get a marketable skill so they can use to get better jobs.
So here's an example. Thomas Sowell uses this example in his book, Basic Economics, and it's a really great example. When he was young, he had a job where his job was to help people find their seats at a movie theater, right? Now, it was a really dumb job that any teenager could do after school or something, but it didn't pay that well because it's a job that has like no skills whatsoever. But it did mean employment, it did mean personal responsibility, and it did mean more transactions in the economy, which meant higher tax revenue, a stronger economy, all those wonderful things, right? Now, once the minimum wage was abolished, once they increased the minimum wage, those jobs started to go away. And the reason those jobs started to go away is that there's a price floor on labor, right? You can't go below this amount on labor. And so certain jobs that like certain teenagers could do, or someone that's just bored, or someone that's a senior citizen that just wants to do something cool to get out of the house, can no longer do that job, which means less growth in the economy, less transactions, less cool, personable things, etc. So when I'm talking about, abolishing the minimum wage, I'm not just talking about factory jobs. I'm talking about a stronger economy overall. But if you want to talk about factory jobs specifically, that's why I kept mentioning over and over again the southern border.
Well, the only time that I would see that just abolishing the minimum wage would be good is for like internships to where you're making $2 an hour now, but once you actually gain the skills that you need, then you'd actually be able to make a lot more money. I would see it as feasible in that scenario, but in a scenario that someone's just stuck in that $2 wage gap, or sorry, that $2 wage, I don't see that as feasible, nor do I see it as a moral philosophy to hold to just keep people in like a $2 wage.
Well, if they're getting $2 an hour, they probably can't afford to buy any like food or anything from the local stores. So it sounds like the stores would also need to lower their prices so that these people can actually afford the shit.
Do you think the stores are actually going to lower the prices because someone makes $2 an hour?
Well, hold on, not just somebody.
The
You're
market
talking about like you're saying
price,
like a majority
price
of people
is
in
a
the
supply
area.
and demand equation. What are you talking about?
So,
But second, let me just lay out a scenario. Maybe it needs to be in a narrative form for you to get kind of what I'm saying, right? So let's say at the southern border, there's a factory, right? And in this factory, they pay $2.50 an hour for just like the regular baseline factory position. Now, $2.50 an hour is not a livable wage in America, but it is south of the border. Okay. And so what ends up happening is because that factory is there, less companies are incentivized to move over to, let's say, China or somewhere else, because now there's a cheaper alternative where they don't have to ship things from China. So they can actually afford to pay slightly more than if it was in China. And then what ends up happening is, well, that factory isn't just $2.50 an hour, $2.50 an hour people, right? There's mechanics. Well, they got to get paid. There's, someone that's a manager. They got to get paid. There's an HR person that probably needs to speak fluent English and Spanish, right? So that they can hire people. That person's going to get paid. There's someone that's in charge of the factory, et cetera, et cetera. And so there are some high skill, high wage positions that instead of going to China are now here in America, which increases our wealth and increases our income and pay. But not only that, there are people that can work and live that's better and more prosperous to Mexico. And at the same time, there are some people that will study hard, learn English, work at the factory, maybe go to night school, and they'll become a manager. They'll become some other higher paying job. And we can integrate them into American society because of those factory positions. And it's a net boon for everybody. So it's not like I don't understand your argument against that as a supposed conservative.
My argument against that is that there's going to be people that are stuck in a $2 an hour wage. You are saying that they're not going to get stuck. They're going to move up to manager. That doesn't happen to everybody. Not everybody.
It's not what I
manager.
said.
They're going to be okay. But what I'm saying, you implied that they would move up to manager, that people move up to manager, and that they would make a higher wage. You're implying that this would immediately lead to a higher wage, whereas I'm saying that it wouldn't immediately lead to a higher wage. As a matter of fact, there would be people stuck in the $2 an hour wage, and that is not going to be any way, shape, or form livable.
Well, you repeated what I said, except without actually saying what I said in a straw man. First, so we'll just dismiss with your entire argument there.
Go ahead. Okay, so explain to me how $2 an hour would be livable. Explain to me that. I
just said it was very simple. It's livable in Mexico. If you're commuting across the border, it's livable in many places in Mexico.
Two very different places. Okay.
That was funny.
Yeah, that's the whole point of it at the southern border.
If we want to backtrack, that's fine. But
I'm not backtracking. You're just too stupid to listen.
Okay, I want to ask, do you think, as much as I would agree with it, Scott, do you think that implementing very good, solid libertarian ideals in the U.S. economy will be enough to undermine a country with more than 4 times their population and with direct access to a tremendous amount of natural resources that we don't have?
Absolutely. Because when you talk about resources, you're talking about natural resources, right? But the thing is that our mind is also a scarce resource, right? And so if you have a stronger economy and a better educated populace, then it absolutely can defeat a country that's just limiting itself to cheap slaves in middle China that have shit education systems. And those individuals,
the cheap slaves to the United States.
What?
And also, China's still educating their population, like in terms of they're not exactly currently
the individuals that are working in fucking like iPhone factories for fucking slave wages are not a well-educated population. Yeah, the people living in Beijing.
Would you make an iPhone?
People living in Beijing.
No, they still train, and like it's not like.
Why can't we make iPhones in the southern border with a bunch of Mexicans? What the fuck is the problem with that?
Because it's Mexico and not America? Question mark. I'm really confused here, but I love how this is going.
But it's not. Yeah, it's not like China has no universities or no higher education. Like they are still they're still in academia in China. They're still training engineers. Engineers just as qualified. There are engineers who train in China that come to America to work as well. Like
I love the leftists that refuse to put a fucking flagpole down, as Doobie described it, and like actually have a position and just wait for me to say something and then try and critique and
Wait, you
attack
keep talking.
one specific fucking thing, one
First of all,
specific
I
element
said-
of it. Like I see the dialectic at fucking work, and that's amazing. But like
Well,
I
first of
also
all,
said a much
I've been
stronger
consistent
economy.
From the beginning, I said I'm not sure. I think I aligned with Lactoid. I even highlighted earlier. It seems like I have common ground with Lactoid in terms of I recognize that China's a problem. Do I know exactly what to do with it? I have no problem conceding that I don't know exactly what to do about that. Does Lactoid
Stronger
know exactly
economy.
what to do about that?
Stronger
look,
economy.
I
Stronger
give you
economy
policy.
is better for everyone. It's really that simple. That a freer market is better. And that obviously a freer market is an incentive towards new things. If we had a freer market, we would have a better educated population. Absolutely. If we had a better educated population, maybe companies like Intel and AMD wouldn't be so nervous, especially with all the fucking regulations that we have, to build additional foundries here in the United States instead of Germany, Israel, and Taiwan.
People who make $2 an hour be better educated.
Sproutacus, you're too fucking stupid.
I mean, it's a
to be
simple
here.
question.
I'm sorry. Like,
Say it again.
So, Corey,
So-
are you gonna answer the question, or are you gonna?
Corey, I can give you a
I
policy. for you.
answered the question and laid it out for you, and then
Go
you like
ahead.
ignored it
I would
all
like
and
you to
went
answer the question.
vapid
How would
fucking
someone,
brain.
How would someone who's stuck making $2 an hour be better
Sure.
educated? Answer the question.
Sure.
How would they be better educated?
I'll try one more time to rescue the topic. Okay, I'm gonna try one more time. One more time is foolish, I know.
Apparently, everyone just wants to fucking talk to me tonight, PrimeCayes.
Look.
Only
You're
make such dumb
charming.
statements.
You draw people in. You got a magnetic personality. It's only natural, right? So okay. All right.
Prime, can I quickly answer Corey's question before you put us back on track?
Go ahead. Sure.
Go to the bathroom.
Sure. Go ahead, please.
Thank you.
This shit is so
my,
brain dead and hilarious.
Well, sorry.
my policy is as follows, and it would apply to
So,
Google as well.
Ginger, you haven't
Any
said anything.
company. Any company. So yeah, free market, liberalize it with one exception. The one exception is we're going to pass the Communism is Danger Act, and what this
Well,
act
I'm
does,
pro-communism united.
yeah. So you're not gonna like this act.
Nah,
It's
but
gonna
I'm
it's gonna
joking.
it's gonna outline a list. You know how Obama had a list of countries that he didn't want like immigrants coming, and then Trump later implemented that list. This is gonna be a list of countries that we don't want to do business with, right? Countries that are communist, right? So I'm thinking China, right? Is Russia really communist? They're bad enough. Okay, they go on the list as well. And every company that does business with these countries gets a 5% increasing over time every year, some small amount every year, tax, and that amount gets put into a fund which helps subsidizes their relocation to free countries. And then over time, we will eventually divest from all these hellholes, and it'll be perfect.
And I can see some. I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I could see, but some might label you as a monster for advocating that type of state intervention and taxation.
Scott.
I'm not.
Isolated.
Hey, Corey, you're gonna drive me insane. Actually, as you say, some might say this, or I don't know if this. Like, stake a fucking position. Like, what do you believe? Make a firm stance on something.
I believe that yes, China is a problem, and that something should be done. And I have no problem saying that. I don't have the
What's
exact.
something?
Do you like my policy? Do you like my
idea.
policy?
That's why I asked Lactoid. Like, I can see that can work or potentially work. I'm not necessarily strictly opposed to that idea.
I'd be a great politician. Just saying.
You're not strictly opposed to it, but are you in favor of it?
In favor of
Sure, what-
Pardon me?
Yeah. Well, I want you to like take a firm position on something for once, please. I'm begging you, because I think Scott's right. So typically, what you and others do, not on every topic, but on most topics, I think, is rather than take a position, you wait for somebody else to take a position, and then you like needle them from the sidelines when they slip up or say something that you think you might be able to get them on. Right, which is respectable. I commend you. I do that sometimes too. It's really fun. But I would just like, you're a smart guy. I'd like to know what you think about things. That's it.
Okay. Well, first, fair enough. I appreciate that, I guess. But I have no problem conceding that I don't think it's completely black and white. At least not to me. I'm I'm not a pure consequentialist, even though Scott might label me as a pure consequentialist. I'm not a pure, virtue ethicist either. I think some elements can work depending on the context. And so if you want my exact answer of in this particular instance of this particular issue, do I think, again, I guess I'm repeating myself, of some action should be taken towards China? Because yes, what China does, how it conducts itself, and all the things that the West has to do to acquiesce to China is a huge problem. And that I generally want to cultivate Western values more than many of the
So do
values
you
that...
think that private businesses in the West should be banned from doing business with China?
If we want to try that out, I have no problem trying that out. I have no problem expressing the concern that might incentivize, if we're going to isolate China, that there might be some ramifications that we haven't thought about. But yes, I'm all for it. If you want to run that
So that's one
experiment,
policy. Now the other suggestion was that, hey, we actually need more capitalism. We need more freedom within the United States, so that China loses its economic muscle, right? So we're able to suck back some of this economic muscle that they've stolen from us over the years because of our socialist quote unquote policies. Now, do you agree with that? What issues do you have with that idea? Wow.
So I'll take a more, I guess, philosophical direction in terms of the values that capitalism tends to espouse, or the values that tends to go along with capitalism. I think there are dire consequences associated with that in terms of a free market, and you being turned into a consumer and materialistic values. Those have very detrimental outcomes to humans.
So my question is this, Corey. Would you be for or against abolishing the minimum wage?
I would be against. I would strictly be against abolishing the minimum wage.
Right, Roger. Got it. But you recognize that those jobs are being done somewhere for that wage, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
Why is it that you just want a pretty little notion of your country not having those bad wages, but you're okay so long as it's just Chinese people doing it?
No, I never said I was okay with China having that. At least I don't think I did. If
so
I did, then I will.
Do you think there should be a global minimum wage?
I have no problem with that either. Potentially, yeah.
So
as in, if it's good for the United States and Canada, why not the rest of the world?
So you do realize that once we have a global minimum wage, that's just going to be a massive price increase that will eventually even out towards the people that are making at the lower end of the distribution something relative towards the increase of wages for other people.
You got to keep them class. The middle class in Mexico is $19,000 a year, and they're able to live off that just fine. Right. So,
depends on where you
here's
live.
the problem. Here's the problem.
So let me.
Here's the problem.
Clarify. I'm not saying whatever a $20 minimum wage should be a $20 minimum wage in Mexico. When I say global, as in do I think every country should have a minimum wage that is reasonable in terms of a livable wage? That would be my answer. Not a global, all the exact same dollar value.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Corey?
Yes.
Are you saying that global minimum wage, it sounds like, or rather, I'll just make a statement. It sounds like global minimum wage to you is that each country should have some standard of a minimum. Is that what you're trying to say?
A global livable wage would probably be the better phrasing. Yeah.
I agree with what Corey is saying. Corey is basically saying that according to where you live, that the minimum wage should be livable. You should be able to live off the minimum wage and not have to try and beg for money to just try and live. So I agree with Corey. I think that in Mexico, the minimum wage may be much different than the United States. Actually, state to state inside the United States, it should be much different.
Who do you
basing
feel...
off of the price of living.
Yeah, who do you feel should be responsible for setting what livable is? Is it something that each individual country does, or do these countries create some kind of authoritative body that sets a level of standards or something different?
So that's where you got me. I don't know who should be in charge of this.
That might be something.
Yeah, it's a spitball idea, obviously, because we're all our brains are kind of tiny on this. It's not our job to set these type of things, but just kind of wondering where you're at.
Well, actually, everyone's brain is kind of tiny on central planning. It's the economic calculation problem.
Okay. Anyway, so what are you saying, Corey?
Well, so yeah, I foresee probably something similar to what Canada does in terms of the Quebec minimum wage is different than the Ontario minimum wage, as in it probably it's probably best left up to the state actors that actually have a better idea of the boots on the ground of what's going on locally.
I mean, to say
Yeah.
that anybody can live off of $2 an hour is just kind of silly. Because I mean that
There is some
would
place in the
that
world where
would
you
equal.
can.
I mean,
2
but in
American
America, that
dollars.
would equal like less than $4,000 a year, and considering it's about $1,000 for the cheapest apartment in most places for even a studio apartment, you're looking at not being able to even do that for.
Well,
a month.
I live
First
in
of
Indiana.
all,
I live in Indiana.
first of all,
I live in Indiana.
$1,000 a month
I
for
pay
a studio is only in fucking expensive cities.
I live in Indiana.
not
I pay
true.
$800. I pay $800 a month for my mortgage. I live in Indiana, but those so like
I pay
the
$400
vast amount of
Jesus.
difference there actually is between
Yo.
states is
for my
insane.
mortgage.
But even with $800 for a mortgage, you wouldn't be able to do that with $2 an hour.
No, I agree. I agree with what you're saying, but what I'm saying is even in the United States, the cost of living is vastly different between states.
Yeah, send me
so
some Zillows. Send me some Zillows, Sprout. Jesus
So
Christ.
I pay $400 for my mortgage,
Stop.
inclusive of everything.
God
So-
damn, fucking
and
Republicans, bro.
that's for a house, right? I mean, yeah, you get to the Midwest and
Fucking
shit gets
Republicans
real cheap
flanking
really
the
quick.
left on houses,
And-
bro.
It's like $1 million
And-
Canadian.
Well, and
This is
Scott's
just-
right.
This is
Scott's
just
right on
bad
everything.
economics. Like,
Yeah,
it's just
minimum
so silly.
minimum
Like,
wage only
People
leads to
are paid
unemployment
for
and
the
inflation.
value of their. People are paid for the value of their labor. Period.
Well, according
Like
to you.
when. No, it's just basic economic theory. Like, people are paid for the value of their labor. If you just start artificially increasing how much they're making, all you're going to do is make goods and services more expensive. And because those goods and services are more expensive, the value of the dollar that they have goes down. And then you're constantly using central planning and wasting money out of the economy to try and chase this fucking issue. What I'm saying is that when you put a minimum wage in, what you do is that you force certain jobs out of the market, obviously. And when you force jobs out of the market, you slow growth, you slow GDP, and I don't understand. Like, this is just mind-boggling how fucking stupid these takes are. Like,
I mean, we can live in an economy where we like, or you can have like other priorities. Like, but like we can have which seems like most countries decided that we can have a buy-in. They're like, hey, you know what? Even if there's probably something more hyper specifically like profitable we can do, we can all just pitch in a little bit to make sure that like people aren't actually homeless, and like whatever that costs.
No, these people want a fucking minimum wage so that when they walk outside, they don't have to see anything bad in the world. And they can think that the world's fucking pretty while they're picking up their goddamn iPhones that are made from fucking slave labor of people that are literally beaten, raped to death in Africa by Chinese slave owners. But it's okay because it's not happening here.
Shit up.
Wait a minute. I got you. But
I'm not making shit up. Like, have you never fucking heard of conflict medals?
Didn't we just state?
Wait a second. Let's only come to deal with that first part. Do you think that it's okay for a society to decide that, hey, the buy-in to this society is that we all pitch in so that people aren't homeless? Do you think that that's something a decision a society can come to?
I mean, if individuals want to voluntarily associate,
not individuals, a society. I'm saying like that.
I don't think a society is not a person. I've never met society.
I know I'm not talking about a person. That's why
exactly.
I'm making that distinction.
Right, I believe in individual rights. I don't believe in some amorphous organization that uses violence and coercion against people
what was the first
and says
part?
they represent the fucking will of the people.
Wait, what was the first part? Oh, I missed you on the first half. I'm gonna laugh. What'd you say?
Oh, no.
You don't believe that like there can be a buy-in. You don't believe that like decided like if you want to live here, these are the types of things that these are part of our rules.
I already said that if you want to voluntarily do things and you have rules based off of that voluntary association, I'm fine with that.
Right, but that would be called being a country like that. Like you voluntarily associate to be here, stay here. Like you're like
if everyone voluntarily associates and there's no theft and there's no violation of the non-aggression principle and they set themselves up collectively and they come to some decision, that's not a state and that's not a country. That's just that's a covenant community.
Sure, but if you have children that are born in that country and they're like, oh, I don't want to do that, then they would say like, if you want to live here, you still have to do this stuff.
Right, and so if you're imposing things upon people, and
they would either have to leave or like they they didn't choose to be in this country. They were born into this country. So you're saying that like
you make a choice when you come of age.
Yeah, exactly. So you would say that like, oh, okay, these are the rules, and if you don't want to participate in those rules, you can leave.
Yeah, you can divest, and they should allow you to divest.
All we did was
What if you don't have the
recreate
money to divest?
All we're talking about
If
is
you don't have the money to divest, sucks to be you.
That's
Like,
right.
Ah.
Fucking die.
Yeah.
So wait, so for the more like consequentialist people here, I mean, the Biden's own White House report admitted that a minimum wage increase would lower the GDP and raise unemployment. There's also other studies that show that any raises in the minimum wage also increase crime, property crime, by as much as 2%.
Unless
per,
minimum
10%
wage is
increase.
localized. If minimum wage is localized, it wouldn't do that. It's talking about a national minimum wage. Minimum wage should be localized. It should not be done via the federal level.
the thing is,
It was referring to a federal minimum wage, yeah, but that's generally what people talk about when they talk about raising the minimum wage.
Yeah, I'm saying like Sprout, I agree with you on that, but the reality is like this was only an issue because other states and cities and local like they don't actually address this issue. Like I'm from the state of Georgia. Like if they like our technical minimum wage is $5.15, but that would like if they actually address that issue on the state level, maybe we wouldn't have to have like federal minimum wage.
It is invariable. It is invariable. It is just a fact of reality that if you increase minimum wage, you price certain jobs out of the market. There's no way you can argue yourself out of that. Once you price certain jobs out of the market, right? That means that you have less of a demand for labor. And so the price demand equation of labor must then fall. It devalues the wages of everyone when you increase minimum wage. You just say some magic shit and say, we must make this certain amount of money, except you don't have a fucking commodity currency. You have fiat currency, and then it gets away from you, and then you devalue that labor. And once you devalue that labor, everyone's purchasing power goes down. It fucks over the people and the economy, and it makes the rich richer.
I don't care about this. I'm saying that even after that, let's say that we didn't do that and we still decided we're going to come up with some, again, this is a magic libertarian world. We're going to come up with some crazy idea where like people pitching like a money from their wages that aren't minimum wage to make sure that people who had to work for $2 an hour could afford to live in the economy. Like again, voluntarily.
Yeah, it's called mutualism. I don't have a problem with that.
We run out of time for whatever the fuck it was I planned
for
this,
Google
right?
in China.
Who cares? Yeah, right.
Dude, I tried to bring it back to China.
No,
People got mad at me for talking about slave labor.
I get it.
Like fucking.
I get it. I hear you.
More
right?
so than rape, but it's okay.
Just the force of your magnetism is more powerful than
Sorry, your cell phone's bought off of rape. I don't know what to tell you.
Okay.
Okay.
So
what do you use? What phone do you use, my
folds,
friend?
Scott. It folds.
Next topic.
Buy a free phone. That's all I'm saying.
If you're
Fair
enjoying whatever the fuck this is, hit that follow button. If you're new here, hit that follow button. Make sure notifications are on so you're not going live. We do this all the time. Don't you miss out. X for social and chat for social media. We got Twitter, where we tweet things, Discord, where we do everything, offline and online, our conversations. So if you want to be part of that, have our Discord, and that's where we'll have our open walkout panel after this. So hit up us on Discord, go to our TikTok and YouTube. If you miss anything,
hey, thanks for the sub. Appreciate it.
Like, comment, and subscribe.
These people don't give a fuck about poor people. They just don't want them in their neighborhood.
Go back to
or in their country.
Yeah, let's do this. The second topic. The NFL is under fire for allowing a seemingly concussed player to go back on the field. The NFL may rightly deserve blame if they are creating an unsafe work environment, but are they the only ones at fault? Are the fans responsible for supporting a brutal sport? And are parents at fault for encouraging their kids to participate? So yeah, there is a football player named... I don't know how the fuck to pronounce this dude's name. Tua Tagovailoa.
Tua Tagovailoa.
Sure, whatever. TT. The
most disrespectful name he's been given thus far, TT.
I'm sorry. I just don't know what the.
My niece and nephew call me TT.
Yeah.
Point proven.
Oh, she does speak.
Tua. I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. But anyway, he got concussed, but then he ended up back on the field later on. And this became a whole big thing. And uh, it seems to me, just quickly, it seems to me that a lot of people are um, trying to claim a moral high ground on this, as to, hey, well, we need to protect the players, but still, I want to have the sport where the concussions are involved, right? Like that these things are like intertwined, right? But damn you NFL for not doing a really good job of protecting them. So I'm wondering, like, is there more blame to go around here? So we'll start with my man Bam.
Dang, getting off mute was hard. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like people always have this beef specifically for football. I don't understand why this anything people voluntarily go into has like a risk of potential damages that no one ever wants to talk about. But it always comes back to football. I think that the NFL is an organization. Well, actually, it's the richest organization sports league on the planet, and they do actually have a responsibility to their players and members. The fact that there was a doctor that ended up getting fired because they didn't properly evaluate Tua after his first concussion, and then like he went on to play 4 days later. Again, I don't blame Tua himself, because when you are a member of a team, you have a desire to not want to let your team down. So like you try to like push through things. So like that does happen, but like that organization, they have the money, they have the responsibility, they have the resources to they should do a better job of protecting them from themselves. And this has nothing to do with fans. It has nothing to do with like other people taking a moral high ground. I think that it's a wonderful sport, the greatest sport God ever blessed us with. And I don't know. We'll just go into more specifics from there. I just think that everything about this is what I want to fight about.
Oh, great.
Can I go
Fantastic.
next?
You want to go next? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll let you go next, and then we'll go with Scott.
Thank you very thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm gonna plant my flag. Football should be banned. It's a dumb sport. Nobody should be playing football, even watching football. Kind of dumb.
Says the fucking Canadian.
Even Canadian football should be banned.
Yo, I'm about to.
I think, especially.
I'm about to
given
get
that, I think
spicy.
there's a good enough amount of evidence to show that pretty much you're at higher risk of CTE and other neurological conditions, and especially it seems like, and I might be wrong, but it seems like, children can very often get, socialized towards football from a young age, as in I think even high schoolers play football.
You guys are gonna hate me.
It's understandable if they're good at it and there's enough incentive, they want to continue on with that, and they probably haven't really actually thought out or don't really understand the ramifications when it comes to the long-term potential complications of playing football. And so, yeah, football should be banned, and I would entertain other sports as well.
All right, so I'm going to say something very close to what Corey said. I think enrolling your child in tackle football is tantamount to child abuse, and you should not be able to maintain control of your children at that point. It is very, very obvious that there is extreme risks to the constant traumatic brain injuries from football. That, it's difficult to tell. We just have like autopsy reports of individuals that were in the NFL. Out of 111 suspected cases of TBI, they found 110 had signs of CTE. Even if we were able to take every single NFL person that had died since then, it would still be 9% rate if all of them were negative. Like, it is a serious problem that leads to permanent brain damage. This permanent brain damage increases aggression, increases memory loss, leads to dementia, leads to depression, lack of impulse control. There is a reason why football players can't stop beating their wives, and some of the reason for that is because of the traumatic brain injuries. Now, if you want to have flag football or no tackle football of some kind, and you want to hone your skills, and as an adult, you want to engage in that behavior, that's your choice. But you need to have informed consent. And it is exactly this reason that I think the NFL should be sued out of existence. I don't agree that $1 billion plan to settle their contracts is enough. And the reason for that is very simple. They committed fraud. Individuals went to them and signed contracts. And despite the fact that Dr. Bennett Omalu had discovered from Iron Mike Webster that CTE existed and was a prevalent and severe issue in the NFL, they did everything they could to discredit him. They lied about him. They hired their own scientists to spread rumors. Since the 1990s, they knew about these issues, and instead they set up the minor traumatic brain injury system as a means of trying to downplay and lie to people. And this is tantamount to fraud. They should be sued out of existence for everyone that has ever been a part of the NFL that can show traumatic brain injuries. And then if a new organization wants to start up, they can start up and they can do whatever the fuck they want with adults. But children should not be susceptible to traumatic brain injuries over and over again for fun. It's child abuse at this point. I would say the same thing about anybody that allows head kicks in Taekwondo or in teaching kids MMA. I would say the same thing about certain portions of hockey. I would say anything that encourages repeated traumatic brain injury is tantamount to child abuse. And you can hate me and you can say you love your football all you want, but permanent damaging of your children's bodies and minds is child abuse, period.
Okay, thank you so much. Again, I love how we have some shy people here on the panel. Don't want to stake a claim. No, thank you for that, Scott. Let's go to Joe.
I just didn't think we'd run into 2009 arguments about this. I thought we'd move past that, but I guess not. That's all right. It's not the early 2000s anymore. Fans are not stupid. Parents are not stupid. Coaches are not stupid. They're aware of the risks and challenges that face football. And when it comes to the NFL, it just seems that time and time again, they lag a little bit behind of the consensus that's from underneath it. Certain states like in New Jersey, we have limitations of tackle football. We have limitations of contact, whether it be thudding or tackling. But the biggest thing, like expansions of helmets and what helmets are used, the NFL's finally did that and finally like trying to have like a much more conscious and aggressive process of which helmets are regulated, which helmets are unregulated. Also they're still not quite there when it comes to contact restrictions, but that's like what I'm talking about, where it's like they kind of figured this out at the youth level, they figured this out at the high school level, but it seems like the NFL is constantly lagging behind. As far as the Tua situation is concerned directly, it just kind of falls on the Miami Dolphins, and also it falls on the concussion protocol, where since there's a level of subjectivity that comes with the concussion protocol, you can have players that kind of skirt away with certain injuries. But even in this case, it was very clear that Tua, the first time when he got hit against the Colts, he was concussed. Like, and this is just was the consensus of like there's nobody acts like that as they're walking back to a play. But granted, there's a level of subjectivity that goes within the percussion protocol that allows that to happen. So firing the doctor that reviewed him does absolutely nothing. I think what is good about this is that there is a hope that there's going to be a revision of the concussion protocol. That's something that's already being talked about by the coaches and players alike. So we're probably going to see some type of change about that towards the end of the year, because thankfully now there's a players organization that actually treats this seriously. Because again, it's not the early 2000s and 90s anymore. But yeah, like it's a slower process than I'd want, but we're getting there. I'm gonna let my child play sports because I'm not a fascist. So that's all I got for now. Maybe we'll argue, but we'll see what happens.
Man.
Brian Flores tried to tease.
Sorry, what?
I was saying Brian Flores tried to like show us that the Dolphins are a horrible organization.
Let's go.
I mean, we knew this too. Like,
Lactoid. I'm very excited what you have to say.
Yeah, I pretty much agree on the idea of kids should be limited in doing this. You know, when I played soccer as a kid, and my parents were very firm with the coach, he's not allowed to give headers because constant soccer ball hitting on your head over time, there's some evidence that can cause some injury. Obviously not as bad as football, but so I just wasn't allowed to do it, and I could play soccer just fine. Common sense restrictions like that on as many sports as possible to limit the injuries that can happen to children, I'm fine with. Once you become an adult, I don't care if you want to play with a razor ball taped football, right? As long if you can consent to it, right? You're an adult. You can make it. It could be blood sports. You can make it as violent as TV will allow. Maybe you got to put the show on like a adult only channel or something. Blood football. I don't know. You can do whatever you want. When it comes to kids, I definitely understand the concern. Would I go as far as banning all contact sports? I mean, I would definitely be in favor of making sure they're mandated safe. And for certain sports like boxing or MMA or football, perhaps those are contact football. Perhaps those are sports that kids should not be playing. Perhaps that should be left up to universities and the pro league.
I'm sorry.
As to this,
you don't get to give TBIs to your kids.
Even if you're an adult and you consent to getting
permanent damage
in whatever
to the
way
child.
you so choose. The one concern I do have is if you lose your leg and you want to keep playing, I don't care. If you get part of your torso removed and you want to keep playing, I don't care. When it affects your head, when it affects your consciousness and your ability to consent to things following, then I start getting more concerned, right? Because the whole idea of looking at rational actors as being able to consent is that they're rational actors. And if you have somebody who's concussed beyond belief and is agreeing to keep playing when in reality they can't really agree to keep playing, that's where I get concerned. I don't think people who are concussed should be able to keep playing because I don't think they can continue to consent to that risk. But as long as you're of sound mind, you can basically consent to whatever crazy shit you want. But no kids.
Ginger.
Yeah, I feel like the NFL pays their players just enough money to keep them on the field until they're injured enough to no longer be able to play and no longer to be able to do anything else. The NFL is about the money, and the players are just that to them, just money. They do not care about their health. It is clear from what we've seen. And as far as kids being able to play it, I don't think they should be allowed either. Touch football, no tackle, completely fine, but being able to play a sport that injures grown adults' brains, imagine what it does to the children. So
Children don't hit as hard.
Sprout.
All right, so a few things to point out. Corey's saying football should be banned, should be completely discounted since he's a Canadian. He knows nothing about American football. Just completely discount his opinion during this entire topic. He's
Fine.
Canadian. So Scott, he basically equates football to child abuse, but only mentioned brain injuries. Would talk about people in the NFL. Did not mention brain injuries in regards to the high school sport level. In regards to other sports, did not mention anything regarding high school. Did not mention anything regarding minors as to injuries. Only mentioned injuries in the retrospect of talking about professional football. I agree the concussion protocol needs to be upped. But
literally just making up
the
shit.
The simple idea here is that everything involves a certain amount of risk, especially when you're playing sports. I played tennis and I got a concussion playing tennis. I ran into the fence trying to get a ball that was headed towards the fence and bounce and basically hit it back. I was able to hit it back, but I ran into the fence. The fence was not rigid, and so I actually ran into the fence and the fence bounced me back out. I ended up hitting my head against the concrete. And the person who was in charge of concussion protocol for the team that I was playing, because I was away, was basically made me do sprints and said I wasn't concussed. Which, by the way, I don't know if you know anything about concussions. Sprints is not how you tell if someone's concussed or not. And so my coach was pissed off. And then I went back to playing because I was told I wasn't concussed. I swore every ball went through my racket. And then when I talked to my medic for my team, my medic took me off the court immediately. And said I was concussed. And so there needs to be professionals that are able to tell concussions from non-concussions, and they need to be absolutely neutral to the game. They're not a team's professional, nothing. They need to be neutral to the game and be able to actually evaluate the player as to whether the player is concussed or not. That seems to be what the NFL is doing. The NFL is not all about it for the money and nothing about the health of the players. As a matter of fact, the NFL made the offensive lineman, which has received the most amount of concussions, wear the extra padding over the helmets during practice and during the training games to try and help the offensive linemen not get concussed during those times. So I think the NFL is certainly trying to protect its players. I think it's got a long ways to go, don't get me wrong, but I do not think football should be banned. Every sport contains a certain amount of risk. As a matter of fact, you sign a liability waiver when you play a sport for a high school, and certainly playing a sport in high school is not tantamount to child abuse.
Evie.
I'm actually pretty torn on this one. I think I'd like to hold off and listen to the arguments first.
You mean like
Based.
a liberal? All right.
Yeah.
So
Plant your flag, doobie. What the fuck?
No, I have no flag this time. Okay.
All right, open to the panel.
Yeah, I think that, like, I think that if you're not really engaged with the sport, I feel like people below the number of players who again, CTE is still like a sort of a new thing. I mean, like, we've known about it since the 80s, but as far as like the research that is being done into it now, like, it's still not a super common thing. Like, I think there's actually I saw something saying that there's like, you have a higher percentage chance of like children who were in band in high school ending up experiencing deafness, like loss of hearing throughout their lifetime. But I don't hear like a big crackdown about children shouldn't be allowed to play instruments. Music is child abuse. Like,
this is a bad example, just because CTE is fairly unique, and there's a reason why. Well, there's multiple reasons why there's not a lot of research about CTE, and one of the reasons is because it's impossible to diagnose, or you only diagnose it until the person is dead. You only officially diagnose it, similar to Alzheimer's. It's only through autopsy. So, like, yeah, it's no surprise that it's not. Go ahead, Joe.
We can recognize that there just seems to be better preventative measures and active research and information on this, and information that goes down to players and parents alike. Is going as far. I mean, I don't think you mentioned they were wanted to ban it or anything, but yeah, like, again, I can't stress it enough. Like, we have regulations that are at the youth level, that are at the high school level, and at the college level. The NCAA, they're kind of weird because they're recommendations, but most colleges adopt the NCAA recommendations, and I think they need to be more strict on that. But
and it's also a number that, like, it's something because of the stress we put into it, it's a number that's been like constantly going down. Again, like, using the NFL, which is like the highest level of the game, isn't even necessarily a great example, but I think they were down to, I think there's like 1900 players in the league, and I think there's a 17 game season, so there's like, I think like 30,000 attempts, like 30,000 player attempts to have concussion over an NFL season. I think last year you had 170, which I don't know what percentage of what percent that is, but it's like it's something that's still not obviously where you want it to be, but is a number that like is in a decline because we are actually getting better at equipment. Where if you watch football, there's a really big
concussions are going down.
Focus and players not using like leading with their head, like, because that's actually the biggest priority of it.
But also we can recognize too, if we're gonna like keep things transparent, that there needs to be better regulations on terms of certain hits, right? Like, the first initial thing which they did, which was understandable, and like what they should have done years ago, was the idea of using your helmet as a weapon. But now a big problem about this, and thank God the Kelseys have a podcast now that like brings light to this. Like, defensive tackles and defensive ends are now using their shoulder blades as a weapon when they're cutting on edges. So what they end up doing is, once the once the ball, I'm going to normalize this to the best of my ability. And Sprout might know what I'm talking about too. When the ball snaps, defensive ends now go in an angle to cut inside or cut outside, leading with their shoulder blade. And basically what that happens is that just rocks, and Kelsey talked about it in his pocket, it just rocks your face mask.
Well, actually, they'll do that when they tackle too, and oftentimes they get called for it though, because when you're talking about the NFL, you're talking about people who are extremely fast. And so when you try to lead with your shoulder towards their head, you'll actually more than likely end up making head-to-head contact, and referees will call that.
Gronkowski changed.
It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to see when a wide receiver's doing it than when it's offensive linemen, because offensive linemen just kind of jump to the snap, and it's a lot harder to actually catch when it's offensive linemen or defensive.
Yeah, I mean,
linemen.
for fuck's sake, that's why Gronkowski changed his face mask, because every single time that was just a thing that people did to him, and he's just like, I'm like, literally, there's like I forget which there's like a really like funny clip where he's just like, I'm sick of this shit. Like they keep going after my face mask. And then you have Tom Brady just kind of like,
Hit the ball.
But that's like but again, like to be transparent, that's another problem that leads to head injury, because we understand that like when you take one aspect of a player, they're just going to use another part of their equipment to use to lead and to take a player out, especially, and this is like something that's very common in pro wide receivers. This is why some of them just like outright avoid the middle of the field. And this is like the one reason why the free safety position had to be revised, thanks to players like not excluding but not excluding to Brian Dawkins, John Lynch, Roy Williams.
You forgot Bob Sanders.
Bob Sanders would lay the Troy Polamalu. And they had free reign. They were doing shoulder and helmet. They didn't give a fuck.
The whole body.
What's the risk of like brain damage, specifically from high school football? Right?
From high school football?
I'm not talking the NFL.
I actually have the stats here. The stats here for high school football. It was the majority of injuries. The majority of football injuries. It was actually the majority of injuries sports wide. It was the majority of actually soccer injuries as well. But 21.7% of all football injuries in high school was a concussion, followed that by ankle sprains. But
I'm saying how many like total, like of the people who play football in high school, how many
how
many get concussions?
For the 2018-2019 school year, it's 99,036 people got concussed throughout the 2018-2019 school year.
And again,
I'm looking up 10 for 10,000. So
that ignores like one of the problems with CTE. It's cumulative damage over time. Like sure, the rate of concussions can be low, but you can like isolate it to high school. But it's the reality of like playing football for like whatever decades.
But if we isolate to high school, then we're talking about the accusation of child abuse being tandem to
so
that football, which it just isn't accurate.
So that's what my concern is, right? Because I'm only interested in isolating it to high school because that's when you have kids playing. That's when you have minors engaging in an activity that I'd be concerned if this activity was inherently dangerous. 99,000. I mean, that could be a lot. Just
you've got millions of high school players a year.
But that also ignores
that's also reported. That's reported concussions. I guess.
Well, there's also like just to be clear too, if we're being transparent, that a lot of these injuries also come from special teams, where kind of like we figured out. When I say we, not we, I didn't do shit, but basically coaches and athletic coaches figured out that hey, you know, there are problems with players getting hit in certain types of schemes and certain types of setups. But the one area that's kind of been neglected, admittedly, is special teams, where a lot of players use that as a vehicle to fuel themselves to be on the team. And a lot of times that's where the most vicious hits come from. Which
is actually why the NFL moved the touchback for the kickoff to the 25-yard line instead of the 20-yard line to try and provide more of an incentive for the person who is fielding the kickoff to kneel it in the end zone, take the touchback instead of trying to run it out to move the starting point further out to take a touchback.
It also puts the first protectors in the front closer to each other because they realize, like, you know what, giving someone a 40-yard head start, probably, like pull out is probably not for the best.
And then mind you too, like just in terms of transparency, like we had 2 players in Jersey die due to head-related injuries. We don't know what the final confirmation is, but that happened 2 days in a row, where just one kid just didn't wake up for school, and the other one, I think, just died of practice or something like that. And the big thing was they were both on special teams. It happened on special teams related injuries. And like now, finally, the NJSIA is like, okay, we are probably going to ban kickoffs. So, and that's like a net good, I think. Like,
this is anecdotal as well, but like I knew a kid in high school who was on the football team, and he got messed up. He had multiple brain surgeries, removed fragments of skull from the back of his head. It was a horrific injury. And looking back on that, I guess that's one instance can cause a memory like that to last. But we obviously want to restrict minors from doing inherently dangerous activities. But if the injury rate, if the concussion rate truly is so low, I'll have to look at what percentage of kids play football. What's the estimated percentage of concussions here? But if it's so low, I mean, how much more dangerous is it really compared to something like driving, or something like, eating junk food? When you compare like the long-term effects of these things, because junk food probably kills way more people than football does. Or are we in favor of preventing kids from eating junk food?
Everything has risk. Everything has a certain amount of risk to it. And according to a 2017 study of almost 4,000 high school football players, finds no relationship between playing football and cognition or mental health later in life when the men were 65. This study also stressed the trade-offs that sportiness has health benefits. Men who had played football in high school were more physically active at age 35 than non-players. And so there's been studies that have shown that playing high school football has little to no actual effect on the cognitive ability or your mental health ability later on in life. It is when you start playing college football or when you start playing NFL that people start recognizing this thing. It's because you're getting hit much harder. You're not playing high school players. You're playing college players. These people have been selected from their high schools as the best of the best. So when you start moving towards the best of the best, there's going to be harder hits. There's going to be a lot more chance of injuries. As you can see in the NFL, the rate of injury is much higher than it is in the high school level because you're playing against professionals. And so it's very, very hard to compare what happens to NFL players to what happens to high schoolers.
Yeah.
Well, go for it.
Those are all good. Those are all good points. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm just curious if you could maybe send some of that stuff. Because I mean, there's some
I've got
studies.
the 2017 study right here. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one from 2020 that's from American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons that there's increased rates of concussion despite all the things that are to make it less. But then of course there's other
compared to what?
Increased concussion rates in high school.
This is a longitude study, so it's actually studying the players far after they're done playing, like age 65 and age 35. It's a longitude study, not necessarily a study.
The problem with that, and both of these studies present problems, right? TBI is a really difficult thing to study. And the problem is both of these studies have problems. Number one, it's not really a longitudinal study if it's just comparing elderly individuals, right, that say that they played football. Right. Because what you're having to do is what you're saying is this select group of people played football. So, I mean, I'll have to look at the study to see how they're comparing it to the general population and whether or not that's necessarily even transferable to other people playing now. And then, of course, what they were doing back then was probably worse. Right. If we're going to be honest, if they're 65, helmets. They're probably, I was about to say, they're probably rocking leather helmets and shit. Right. So this is probably the worst of the worst. You're absolutely correct that individuals that are older. But yeah, is it a majority of sports concussions? There's so many issues here. Almost half of these injuries occur during practice is concussions. We're not even talking about during the game.
In what context?
Concussions in high school
individuals. He's actually right. Most concussions in high school end up during practice.
Right. So let's be specific here. Right. That's because if we're talking about if we're talking about the NFL, this is a different conversation. We're talking about in high school.
Oh,
and the reasons why that exists are different.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of the NFL, I don't give a fuck. Do whatever the fuck you want, so long as you have informed consent. I'm just saying that the NFL has committed certain crimes, which is they obviously knew that this was a bigger issue, and they attempted to discredit scientists. They banned them from events. They set up their own kind of paid studies that most of which couldn't even get peer reviewed or published in journals, and they put them out anyways. Like, they knew that this was a problem, and they spent a lot of money to try and make sure that it went under the rug. And this is a form of fraud because they're not telling those people.
That sounds like capitalism to me.
So
fraud's not capitalism, right? Like, now, what's going on currently? Yeah, I think they're taking the issue seriously and attempting to make changes. And if people are aware of the dangers currently, like, that's what you sign up for as an adult. And I would say this is even true of college ball, right? Now, when we're talking about high school football, I think that the data is really kind of inconclusive. But what we do know is that repeated concussions are really, really, really fucking bad and cause permanent damage. Not only do they cause some form of permanent damage, they change your impulse control. They lead to depression, anxiety. Now, whether or not that leads to CTE, again, CTE is a relatively new thing that we're attempting to understand. But like repeated traumatic brain injuries, like just look at Doobie, I know loves this stuff. Just look at serial killers. Most serial killers had a pretty severe head trauma at some point. Like it's a pretty common thing amongst serial killers. Like having repeated head trauma is really fucking bad. Does that mean we should ban football?
The common thing about serial killers is trauma in general. And most serial killers didn't experience head trauma. Most serial killers experienced childhood trauma in which it was their parents. When you talk about like the most notorious serial killers, you're talking about their parents did stuff to them as kids. That is the trauma that's leading them to this. It's not a concussion. I wouldn't go as far as to say concussions produce serial killers, and I certainly wouldn't go as far as to say that having your kid play football is tantamount to child abuse. So especially with this 2017 study that I posted in the chat, saying that there's just people who played in high school. There's no difference between the people who played in high school and the people who didn't play in high school. When you talk about mental cognition and you talk about mental illness, there's no difference between the two.
Here's the other concern.
Ron cares so little about football that he checked out of his own panel.
I'm still here. What?
Wait,
okay.
So
I'm not.
So Sprout, hold on.
Can I just challenge that super quick? Because he like said that I'm wrong.
I want to hear.
I'm fucking not.
Wait. Let's Dwight and then Scott.
Yeah, it's just like a tag on, because I think this highlights my issue with this, which is if the study that Sprout's referring to is correct, then that also could lead to another situation here of, well, if we did ban kids from playing it, we know that exercise has demonstrably good effects when it comes to your cognition. We know that exercise is good for everything, basically. And we know that it's very important for kids to develop exercise habits early. And having a wide variety of sports options for kids can make it easier for them to get involved in exercise that could lead to long-lasting benefits for their entire life. So the risk of shutting kids out of exercise at a time of an obesity epidemic, unless we have very solid evidence here, which based on the study doesn't seem like we do have very solid evidence. I mean, I would need to see pretty solid evidence to counter the assumption here that we should be trying to get kids active, right?
Well, there's multiple ways of getting like you're making it seem like football is like one of the very few outlets for physical activity. There are many ways of cultivating physical activity that, like, if you just remove football at the high school level, like, I really don't think that's going to have any sort of dramatic detrimental effect over the long term.
And it's the only sport. It's the only sport on the high school level who has like more than 15 members on a team. Like football is something.
It's usually the second largest, most participated sport or an activity next to marching band. It's usually football, marching band.
They're both
which is supporting football. Yeah. Well, I mean, marching band is there because of the football. Let's be honest.
But this is this is American football. Are you saying like other countries don't have physical activity, and also like if this is the most
the British have rugby. You're right. I played rugby and I played rugby in college. Like are you gonna say that rugby's better?
Rugby has more concussions than football does.
Rugby does have far more concussions than American
I said
football.
during my opening statement that I'd entertain potentially other sports as well. As in, like, there's so many other ways. As someone who's probably like the most athletic on the panel, there's so many ways of being physically active than just football.
you want to see my shot
What-
put?
what
You want
was
to see my
that?
shot put stats,
Hey, do
friend?
You want to call me? I will gladly
We're-
go toe to toe with anybody. I literally do fitness
Post
streams. Like,
physique.
go ahead.
I'd probably knock you out in
Oh.
round one. So let's
Even-
let's not dick measure
said-
athleticism. But it's all good. I
Even
know
girls-
you didn't mean to do that, but
So
you know.
so Corey, so even if you're right that football overall represents kind of a small
Yo,
number
Joe
of,
Lewis being
comparatively,
athletic.
which it
Oh,
likely
it's
does.
funny,
I mean,
dude.
even though it's one of the largest, probably the largest sport
Oh, fuck.
among high schoolers, and definitely the largest sport in the whole country. And even if it's true that most students will find a different sport to like if you ban their favorite sport, what the study Sprout was referring to said that there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that there's actually these long-term effects that we're concerned about. So even if the overall negative effect is small, and I think there will be some negative effect, right? There's some kids who just want to play football, and they're not going to be as active if they're not playing football. And so the question is, does this number of kids that are now going to sink into obesity, does that outweigh, figuratively, the amount of people who are injured as a kid, like with concussions?
Like they're not going to go
well-
from wanting to play
well,
football
first
to
of all-
all of a sudden wanting to play tennis.
You do realize that despite you having the availability of football, you still have an obesity epidemic. That's just a testament to how poorly you tackle the issue, and that like.
Wouldn't that make it worse though? Like
Yeah.
not
That,
having.
that just that,
Yo,
ju-
the
that just means-
Canadian is swinging hard on the fat Americans. Let's go.
That just means that banning football alone is not like the answer alone to like solving the obesity. As in, like you can do other measures. It's not like mutually exclusive. As in, like, you
Okay,
can-
yeah.
you can-
Okay,
But we
well,
can
it's
recognize-
epidemic though, right? So there's all sorts of things that we can do to help solve the obesity epidemic. The major thing
Mhm.
is ending corn subsidies, because that's a disgusting practice that's leading to, I think, to a lot of this. But we're dealing with it. At the end of the day, we're still here. We're sitting in an obesity epidemic, and we want kids to get active, right? I mean, we're airing commercials trying to encourage kids. They're releasing games that are focused on getting kids out of the house. Like we're kind of desperate, right? I don't
Yeah,
understand why.
I
And
agree
and-
and there's answers to that. It's just that you don't happen to implement them.
Well,
This
a
is
lot of,
one
a
tool.
lot of the obesity issue actually, there's been some sorry, I shouldn't say a lot. There's been some studies to prove this. A lot of the obesity issues is because people play sports in high school. They're very active in high school, so they train themselves to a diet. And then they stop being active after they're done playing the sport, and so then their body's still accustomed to that diet, and they will continue to eat that diet, and then they're just not burning the same amount of calories they did when playing the sport.
So football encourages obesity, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, but what I'm saying is being active and then accustoming yourself to a diet that is good for that level of activeness. Then continuing to keep up that diet after you're no longer active. Is contributes to obesity.
I don't think
Did you not get that joke?
I don't think that banning or even advocating for banning is a realistic argument or realistic solution. We recognize that the game, it can be safe. We recognize where the game isn't safe, and we can just do some pretty simple things. The NCAA has a few more problems because they're more mandate the shit, or they're not going to do anything about it. Because if we can have mandates in high school, we can have mandates in college. I like mine are pretty simple personally. I think full contact during the season should be limited to 15 hours per week. During the preseason of that, you can probably extend it to like 2.5 to 3 hours. I'm a bit authoritarian. I'm closer to 15 during the regular season, 30 during the off season. I think that of that 15 minutes, it can only be spent for 2 out of your 5 practices. So I think 3 days should be dedicated to non-contact or minimal contact. 1 day dedicated to tackling, 1 day dedicated to thudding. But the thudding and tackling has to be a cumulative of 15 hours during the regular season, and then 30 minutes during the off season or preseason rather. That's basically where Jersey's at. I'm with them on that. Also, I think that we need to ban turf fields. Period. I think that's another part of
Really bad for your ligaments.
of the concussion process, of the ligament process. It's very, very clear that grass fields, although they might be harder to maintenance when it comes to the high school level, and I recognize the cost of that, it's just that it's causing too many kids damage, and these fields are being used outside of football. You got to go to grass and just spend the money to allocate that, or at least do something to cultivate that. And then I'm more strict. I think that needs to be like banned outright in college. I think turf fields should be banned outright, period. But I think the first fight is at the NFL level, but that seems to have a lot more steam than it is at the college level. Because again, like these fields are used for multi-use, and I recognize that. But listen, like I'd rather have kids and young adults being able to walk and not have brain damage due to the surfaces that they're playing on, you know?
And Lacto, to what you brought up earlier, in terms of like, if there's if what Spartacus pointed or posted is correct, in that there's minimal risk in terms of long term of high school football players, I would say that ignores the fact that I think it's safe to say that like if you start children at a sport young, they are likely to continue playing that. As in, like, I think it's fair to say like the pool of college players like comes from high school. As in, like you are socializing kids into that sport. And to your junk food analogy that you brought up earlier, just as a question of curiosity, how are you in terms of like, are you okay with marketing junk food to children? Because that's how I sort of view it. In terms of, like, you are marketing football to children.
I would cut down on what can be like in terms of junk food being sold or marketed to kids. I think that's way more harmful demonstrably than football is so far. It just, I guess my philosophy is that in order to ban something, it needs to be proven to be an issue. And I guess I'm not convinced for minors it is an issue because, we're not dealing with the circumstance. It's an activity. It's not like, once you become an adult, you can't choose to continue playing football or choose to not continue playing football if you want to continue to like go down that path, right? You can. So really the only concern I have is when you're a kid playing football, what's the risk? And if the risk is high enough, well then yeah, there should be more restrictions. And we should obviously be, err towards the side of safety and, put these kids in bubble wrap and helmets and shit. But I mean, if there's nothing that seems to indicate that they're in a lot of risk and banning it could prevent them from, doing something that they love and doing something that is good for them and potentially a career down the line. It just seems like
I would say I would say this, that if the risk is so low that it's not any more than any other sport, really, like in any significant way, right? Like if you were able to bring the concussion, right? But if you could bring it closer to, right? But what I mean to say is, like, if you can bring it to where it's not, let's say, an entire standard deviation above soccer, which I think in some places where the restrictions are done well, it's there, it's already there, right? In other places, it's not. If you can get it to that point, then I don't think that there's any provable harm that you're really demonstrating by putting someone in this sport. Now, because I think the only way that you can justify, as far as I can tell, whether or not it's considered a forestallment of your guardianship, right? Like whether or not you have harmed your child permanently is not something happened to them. It's, would a reasonable person believe that they subjected them to risk and that risk led to that something happening? And then we're in that position. And so if you can get football injury rates at the high school level down to a point where it's not that different from any other sport or any other activity, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, even if an injury does occur. Because like Sprouticus said earlier, there's a risk to driving. There's a risk to anything that you fucking do. And, doing a pure kind of like cost benefit analysis of what's going on is, to everything is going to lead to the worst helicopter parenting imaginable. That isn't really going to be beneficial to anybody. So like if you can do practices where you're only tackling once a week and you're teaching techniques that are less likely to lead to head trauma, and you're able to have better inspected helmets, and you're fixing certain issues that lead towards additional trauma, you're doing everything that you can, and you bring those rates down closer to something like soccer, which I think is the number 2 for head injuries. At that point, a reasonable person would not assume that their child is going to be subjected to multiple head injuries. But if you're in a situation where those things aren't being done, then I think it's obvious that you're subjecting your child to a situation where they're likely to be permanently damaged and harmed, and you actively chose to put your child in that harm, and they're unable to consent. And this, as far as I'm concerned, is a forestallment of your guardianship. That you no longer have a right to parent that child if you're doing that.
I think
I'm
that
gonna hold on. I'm just gonna
Go for it,
I'm gonna
Ginger.
stick in for a second. I am not feeling very well. That's why I've been quiet all night. I'm gonna bow out. I'm feeling really awful. Thank you for having me, Prime, and it was really nice.
Feel
meeting
better.
you guys.
Have a good one, Ginger.
Feel better, Tucker.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like
Oh, you good?
I'm just again, I'm not for the like. Okay, where do I start? A, if you knowingly do not follow procedure that a authoritative body determines for you to do for your child for a head injury, you should probably get somebody called on your ass. Like, I'm just gonna kind of make
Right.
that clear. Now, like, I'm a bit strict on it. I think that there needs to be a full investigation to determine abuse in situations like that, but those situations are also rare. We're not seeing parents in mass like forcing their kids to go through concussed, and the reason why is that, again, like, the high school level takes this shit seriously. In Jersey, I think you're 2 weeks out. I think it's 1 or 2 weeks. I don't remember the exact measurement of like no physical activity at all. You get signed off to like, if you have gym class, you get exempted from that for 1 to 2 weeks. Depending on the severity, you get like they force you to see medical professionals to even get cleared to come back. And if you don't need to do that, or you don't have the resources to do that, in some districts like mine, they say, great, if you can't pay for it, we'll pay for it for you. So they want to make sure the kids, if they receive some type of like traumatic brain injury, that they're being seen with the right professional. And the professional has to be independent. It cannot be a professional that's recommended by the district or by the school. They give you, they say like, you have to go out and get this. And it's like, okay, where do I go? It's like, we can't make a recommendation for you. However, they can make the situation where if you go and see a health professional and you don't have health insurance, but the school will front the bill. I think that's a good thing, because parents do not all have great finances.
I know that usually when you
else.
I know that usually when you show up to these, you tend to have data and statistics from your own state. It's just kind of how you are. Do you have the rates of concussion and the rates of the percentage of people that are concussed multiple times?
Concussions aren't reported at the high school level in New Jersey. It's an opt-in basis
That's
for
problems.
It's an opt-in basis for research.
That's a serious issue, because
hold on, wait. I want to make this very clear. This is not a New Jersey exclusive problem. A lot of states are very hot and loose when it comes to brain injuries.
Yeah, I'm not blaming New Jersey. You seem to believe that New Jersey is better than a lot of states in certain regards.
I'm in terms they are better in terms of preventative measures, because in my state, there's an authoritative body that rules over high school athletics, which is the NJISAA.
I'm not talking shit. I'm not. I'm saying.
Doesn't every state have that? Because we have the IHSAA.
Yeah, some states have, like, the reason why I say it's a bit more authoritarian than some other states is that ours is like, they're not recommendations. These are things that you have to do, and then if you're not in compliance, they'll come down on you hard. Like, they'll take titles away, they'll take records away, they'll take scores away, they'll go after your ass.
The IHSAA actually forces you, if the coach sees that you've incurred what they deem to be a head injury, they force you to go see a medic to be evaluated. So it isn't like by voluntary. At least in Indiana, it's not voluntary that you get medically evaluated after you're deemed to be concussed.
So my question is this then.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Black.
No, I played high school and college football. High school it varies state to state, but I know that in the state of Georgia, we had we matched the NCAA rule of the 3-strike policy, which is if at any point during your high school career you suffered three concussions, you're just done with contact sports.
Our district is 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's
okay. So that's what I was kind of getting at, right? Like
for college sports, in college football, if you've had 3 concussions, you can't play anymore. Like, this isn't something they're letting you suscept to over and over and over again.
Right, because if you have multiple concussions, we know that there are serious fucking risks, right? Like, it's very difficult to distinguish traumatic brain injury from post-traumatic stress disorder. one of the key things you can tell, other than obviously the environmental factors, like what caused it, is like restless leg syndrome. Believe it or not, like restless leg syndrome, super common with multiple TBIs, not very common with PTSD. But we know that, you know, if you have multiple traumatic brain injuries, that like you're leading to like aggressive behavior, depression, all kinds of issues that are really fucking serious. So I'm glad you kind of answered that question of like, in certain districts, if you have more than 2 or more than 3, like you're fucking done, period.
Well,
What is the prevalence rate of multiple concussions, either in a season or throughout a career, that you think constitutes a reasonable risk where like this is unacceptable and like can't be done?
I believe,
like what percentage of the population?
I mean, I can just kind of give my I guess I can give my stance. I would have to look up some stuff to send it back to you, but for me personally, if you have 3 concussions within a 2-year period, I think it should be pulled out of the sport, period, regardless of where you receive them.
I don't mean at an individual level. I don't mean at an individual level.
No, that's not even an individual level. I want that in the state of New Jersey, period. I want that across, like.
That's not what I'm asking. Maybe I'm wording it properly. What I'm saying is, what percentage of all people that play football would have to be subjected to multiple concussions for you to be like, this is an unreasonable risk that we have to shut down? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Like, what is the percentage where where you've passed that threshold of like, now it is unreasonable for you to be subjecting children to this until this is fixed?
I don't want to participate in this hypothetical, but because hypothetical frames it like there isn't, like, it's unaware that these things aren't happening and they're trying to make the game safer, because we are trying to make the game safer at the high school level. So like in a situation, if I was in like 1997,
we're trying to do like an actual risk assessment here, right? Like what is too risky to put your kids in?
Right. And I'm saying fuck the risk assessment, because we understand what the risks are and that we should probably try to work towards, because we see the measures of making the sport safer and what it's creating. Like having better helmets for people to wear, having better fields to people to play on, having better protocols for concussions, and not this 5-day bullshit where after 5 days you can return for a game. Like we can make the game safe.
But see, like if I had a sport
10%?
that was played in Hawaii, right? And the sport was people ride 4-wheelers over hot lava and 90% of people die from it, but 10% survive and we really like it. Saying, well, no, we're aware of the risks and we're putting flame retardant suits on people is not an appropriate fucking answer. My question is, how many people, what percentage of people have multiple traumatic brain injuries before you're like, we got to shut this shit down until we get that rate lower?
What I want to shut down is kickoffs at the high school level. I want to shut down using your equipment as a weapon. So whether it be your shoulder pads or your helmet, which started from the helmet and now we got to get to the shoulder pad. I want to shut down contact to 15 minutes per week during the season and then 30 minutes during the preseason. These are the things I want to shut down.
Those are great things to make it better, but that doesn't answer the question at all.
I'll answer your question if it makes you like I think if we had a number where like 1 or 2 in 10 kids was like, if you played football, like within that season was going to have some type of concussion, I think that would be a massive problem.
Isn't it 1 in 5?
I've never even had a headache.
It's 1 in 5 are the concussion rates for high school people per season.
No, it's not 1 in 5.
That's not 1 in 5.
It's less than 1%.
It's less than 1%
It's 99,000 out of the entirety of high school players. 99,000 have received concussions.
Right. Okay. So you're saying 99,000 have reported concussions, right? So what is the actual prevalence rate?
And just to clarify, this doesn't take into account that some states don't report concussions as well. Like, is it safe to assume that concussions are underreported?
Which states don't report concussions?
Like,
Joe just said that he doesn't.
No, let's just like actually tell the truth here. That's the only way for a student to be like seen in terms of an injury if there's reason to assume that the student is injured. And Bam knows exactly what I'm talking about if he played football, where that there are players who are clearly injured. We know that they're injured, but they played through it for whatever reason. And on top of that, because of certain regulations that parents are allowed to do, then they're not we're not able to find out that these students are injured before it's too late. So all of a sudden, you might just be playing in a non-contact, and then your leg just stops working, and then you find out that, oh yeah, I pulled it, and then you find out, well, actually you tore your ACL, and you thought it was just a sprain, or you have a situation where, like, I thought I had a broken finger and there was a strain, like, or
Well-
sorry, my finger was strained. Turns out it was a broken finger. Like,
Joe, that's
these
what-
things
Joe,
have to
that's-
be reported.
That's what happened to me. I was in a military competition. It was called the Best Warrior competition. And I was doing night land nav, and I was running, and what I thought was a swamp turned out what I thought was flat land turned out to be a swamp. And so I actually ended up hyperextending my knee. And so I just thought my knee hurt. I thought like I pulled a muscle or whatever. I was in the lead of the competition. I'm typically very competitive. So I continued to compete. I did combatives with a hyperextended knee, and I did a 10K ruck march with a hyperextended knee. Well, it turns out later on that after my sponsor figured I was injured, and I told him I was gonna keep competing. He told me to go see the medic immediately after the competition, and I went to see the medic, and now I have chronic knee tendonitis in my right knee for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I mean, like,
so there is injuries that like you'll play through because you think you're fine, but it leads to lifelong circumstances because you thought you were fine when you really weren't. And so I think it's why it's always important to take it out of the player's hands and give it to a professional as to whether or not that person goes back to the field. Take it out of the player's hands. Because
Take it out of
player is
players'
gonna wanna go
hands.
back.
Take it out of coaches. Take it out of parents.
I'm finding a lot of fucking
So
like,
I just
like
wanna
different stats here.
So
Yeah, it's a lot of conflicting data.
A lot of conflicting, right? So here's one from ABC News. A recent study found that 47% of high school football players suffered a concussion at each season, according to stats gathered by the National Center for Injury Prevention. The problem is the news, even though it's ABC, doesn't actually link the study.
The source, yeah,
annoying.
awful reporting.
Right here, UPMC, 2 out of 10 high school athletes who play contact sports will get a concussion this year. I mean, some of these are scary. Like if it's truly 47%, if 47% of football players in high school are getting a concussion for each season, that can't be allowed anymore.
This
That
is
is
from the
not
American.
okay.
Can I just ask a question?
This is equivalent to saying 50% of people who are participating in band go deaf. Like I have hearing loss. Like that's ridiculously high.
This study is from the American Academy of Pediatrics. And they state that only in the season of 2018 to 2019, only 99,036 players of high school football received concussions. And in that same year, according to Statista, the 2018-2019 season, there was 1,008,417 people who played football in the season of 2018-2019.
So 10%.
That's like 10%.
Hold on. So this is from
10% of players.
This is from the CDC. In 2019, about 15% of all high school students self-reported one or more sports or recreation-related concussions within the preceding 12 months.
What year is that? Wait. So what part? So is that all sports?
Yeah. So 15% of all high school students self-reported one or more sports or recreation-related concussions within the preceding 12 months. And my understanding is high school generally is a higher risk of concussion than other sports. So it would go to reason that probably a higher percentage than 15% of high school football players get a concussion within the last 12 months, right?
It's pretty easy to tell if you have a concussion or not. I could tell fairly well when I got concussed that I was concussed. I could have sworn up and down the balls were going through my racket. I actually ended the match. I was playing doubles, and I looked at my teammate. I said, "Listen, I'm done." And he's like, "No, we got to play through it." I'm like, I'm concussed. I need to get off the court." So we went up to the net. We shook hands. We said, "Hey,
what's that have to do with the prevalence rate?"
So what I'm stating is that it's fairly. So what Lactoid is saying is that this isn't including people that don't know they're concussed. And what I'm stating from personal experience is that you know when you're concussed. If you're concussed, you know that.
No, that's not what he's saying.
Let me read it. Yeah, let me read it one more time. Okay?
I don't buy the 15%.
So this is not even including people who don't know that they're concussed. Okay, this is in 2019 about 15% of all U.S. high school students self-reported.
Yes,
One or
but you
more.
just went further than that to say that people didn't know they were concussed, and that should make that number bigger.
No. What I said is that. So hold on. So
Will you stop obfuscating and just listen?
You're
No, I'm stating what he stated last time.
No, you're misunderstanding, right? So
Okay, so then
So
please
I'll read the whole
inform me.
thing one more time. In 2019, this is according to CDC, 15% of all U.S. high school students self-reported one or more sports or recreation-related concussions within the preceding 12 months. That's all
Okay.
sports, okay? Now, among sports, am I incorrect in believing that football has a higher concussion rate than, let's say, tennis or
Yes,
lacrosse?
Football has the highest.
That's
So, right.
that's
Tennis is
misleading
not.
because
Tennis
then
is not.
the pro-
Tennis is not
All
a
right.
contact sport.
All right,
Like,
I'm-
I
Right.
confuse
Well,
that
no.
confused one.
So if you follow the logic tree here, then
It's
it would-
higher
it-
in football.
yeah,
My
it
nigga,
would-
fuck a
it would-
logic
it
tree.
would
What are
seem-
we doing?
It would seem
Fuck
to
the
be
debate
hold on,
brain
it-
shit, bro.
No, it
Come
would
on.
seem to reason intuitively.
fuck,
Hold
man.
on, it would seem to reason intuitively that like the low concussion rates of lacrosse or basketball and stuff would be dropping the percentage, probably
Yeah,
lower than 15%.
When you take into
But then
account
the football percent
non-contact
would be higher.
sports.
Yeah.
So it seems
so-
to reason. It also seems to reason that when you take into account wrestling versus tennis, that people who wrestle would get more concussions than people who play tennis. You're
right.
comparing, but the thing is, you're comparing contact sports versus non-contact sports.
Yeah.
Yes,
You
is
have
it possible
to
in a non-contact sport to get a concussion? Yes, it's possible in a non-contact sport to get a concussion. But when you compare a
You're
contact
making his
sport versus a
point for him,
contact sport-
Blacktoid. You're making his point for him. I don't think you
Okay,
agree
so-
on it.
Sprout.
all right,
Yeah.
all
So
right,
it's higher. So it's reasonable to assume here that it's higher.
It's higher than 15.
No,
And-
I'm saying
and
that's
for
not
me, the
reasonable.
cutoff-
This
That's
is
what I'm
okay.
getting
All
around.
right. I'm gonna fanatic my way through this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna fanatic my way through this because holy fucking shit. We can recognize that the data needs to be expanded dramatically. There also needs to be data disaggregation because Lactoid, your stance is retarded. Because the reason why it's retarded, and I'll walk it through you like you're a 5-year-old, is that we need to be more specific about when these concussions happen and where these concussions happen. Just making this broad claim of 15%, whether it be 10 or 5, is not good enough and not a good enough bar. We need to disaggregate the data to see why these individuals are getting injured. Bam knows as well as I do that one of the most dangerous places in the football field is the practice field. It's not the main field. And the biggest thing that concerns me is that a lot of these things, especially things like concussions and leg injuries, are happening for football players in practice, which is why I'm even advocating for the limitation of live contact, whether it be tackling or thudding during practice, because we recognize where these risks happen. We can make practice safer for players and put them in a better environment so that they can actually play the sport in a long form instead of getting blasted during a practice and getting outed for 2 to 3 weeks at
You're
a
not.
time.
And Joe,
You're not arguing the point. You're fucking obvious.
I'm not engaging with the point because it's retarded.
Because you don't want to admit that it has a lot of dangers.
No, I'm saying
I
no.
don't-
I'm
I don't
disagreeing
think-
with the point. I'm saying that you're like, again, that we would just need better data on this. But if you're telling me that
This
you're
is
telling
the
me that 7 and
CDC.
10, I'm telling you that cannot be trusted.
Well,
the idea that you're
no,
saying
okay.
2 and 10, 7 and
I
10,
just-
4 and 10.
We need
Like,
data
that's not realistic.
disaggregation.
Doesn't-
We
it's-
need data.
I'm just-
Okay, all
it
right. I'm just gonna
doesn't
make a statement. If you agree or disagree, we can move on with that. We need data disaggregation when it comes to how high school players are getting injured. This includes concussions. Do you agree
And
or
have
disagree with
Corey-
that statement?
Well, I want to
Obviously, I agree, but that's an
Corey,
aside.
I agree
Corey,
with that joke.
Corey,
but
It's not an aside. It's a part of this.
I
We're talking
want to hear from Corey.
Oh,
I wanna
my
hear-
God.
hey,
My
hey,
study-
hey,
Cowards. A bunch of cowards
Corey,
running from the
Nigga, suck
argument.
my dick.
You're a fucking
Like,
idiot.
fuck you.
Guys, shut up.
Coward.
Corey, shut up. I want to hear from Corey. He's been waiting quite a bit. Go ahead, please, Corey.
Well, I mean, this is on the same. I just wanted to ask, hopefully, a simple question. In terms of like, Joe, would you agree or not, at least based off of everything that's been outlined, that regardless of sport, like the rate of concussions is underreported? Would you agree with that statement?
Of course I do, which is why one of the things I also advocate for is the mandatory health evaluations of high school students before they're able to start for a game. So if Bam, for instance, wants to start on Friday, he has to get a positive health evaluation on Thursday in order to play. If he does not get that or refuses to get that, he is not allowed to start, period. That's one of my advocacy points and something like
Right.
that even, but yeah, yes,
So-
of course.
Yeah, but so if you agree with that, and maybe like you just don't, your threshold is just so high that, but based off what Lactoid outlined, like even just to me on the surface, like the data they outlined is pretty startling. And if you would agree that that's
what
an
frustrates me.
that's an
But my-
underreportment.
But Corey, my study.
Let Corey get through it, please.
So like if you agree yourself that's an underreporting, even based off of what I would say lactoid startling data, like maybe this might be futile, but like to what Scott was trying to do earlier, like is there any threshold at all? Like, so it seems like pretty much the banning of football for children is like
he just
off the
refuses to
table.
answer.
It's a non-starter.
My study is actually disaggregated. So when we take a look at my study versus
it's not,
lactoids,
though.
but it is disaggregated.
not.
No, can you give me a second? Because it is. If you'd let me explain, then maybe you'd realize it is. So my study is disaggregated completely to football. Lactoid study is not disaggregated completely to football.
No.
Lactoid study is about all high school sports, and he's trying to make the assumption that my study is wrong based off his study of all high school sports.
No,
Yes.
it's still underreported.
Football has the highest rate. What are you talking about? It doesn't matter.
It is still underreported, as in regardless of your study, like unless they're doing like a thorough assessment, like I haven't read it, so I'm open to being wrong, but unless they're doing a thorough assessment of every single high school player and like assessing them after each game, like the guiding principle is still the same, as in like pretty much like no matter what, the rate of concussion that's reported, it's an underreporting of the actual number.
When you address me, please.
Go for it, man.
I'm begging for that. I'm saying, could we keep going on with like I'm assuming that his number is extremely wrong. That's the assumption.
Why?
I agree with that.
Why?
Because I'm the only one that I have football experience with football. You're giving me numbers that are like on their face.
Have experience with
football.
Your anecdotal experience outweighs all of
Shut the fuck up.
science.
Shut the fuck up.
No. We'll get Bam. Get your point out.
Yeah.
Go. Don't worry. We'll let you have the floor again.
Like you're saying something that's obviously not true. You're telling me that 20% of people on a team of 50. Let's see, what number is that? Was that 10 people are have concussions over a season? I'm saying like I deal with high schools this number is just on its face ridiculous. Again, and I keep bringing it up. And people keep being pissed off. It will be equivalent to me saying something like 60% of children that participate in band have hearing loss. Like on the face value of that, like I don't have to look up the study to know that like that number just sounds like something that somebody pulled out of the butt. That like I'm disagreeing with that at its face.
Well,
I'm saying that 20% of children don't experience concussions over a season.
You're
like,
right.
I've seen data literally as low as like less than 1% of high schoolers ever experience a concussion in their career. So that's what I'm saying.
That can't be right.
So you're just picking the science supposedly that supports your opinion and saying you're saying the CDC is wrong because I know.
No,
like, that's not a good enough answer.
No,
wait,
he's right.
hold on, Bam,
Let me
hang on. Hold on, Sprout, hang on. Fuck the data. We can recognize why Bam is frustrated, because I'm probably frustrated for the same reason. Okay, so if you come to me and say 15% of high school players are having concussions, I go, wow, that's really crazy. And then the next line is, well, let's disaggregate the data. Why are these kids getting concussed? And then we can look to every single sport and see why these concussions happen. And then, okay, if we go to football, and if you show me definitively, hey, in football, there's 50% of people getting concussed. My first response is not to ban that outright. The data doesn't stop when I think it's just enough to ban the thing. The next line of questioning is, okay, how are these individuals getting injured? And one of the things I'm trying to lay it out here, I'm trying to do it to the best of my ability, but apparently it's a little bit challenging, because I know sometimes when I talk, people think I'm retarded, so they think I just go and be pedantic and semantic. So I'll be a bit more clear here. I want to know why high school athletes are getting concussed in the settings that they're getting concussed and in the context that they're concussed. And if you can show me that, hey, 15% of X players are getting concussed for this reason in this activity, in this particular portion of the activity, then yeah, we can ban that point outright, which is why I want to ban kickoffs.
Okay. Can I
please?
She was that good to me.
I've been trying to say as far as 5 minutes.
Get your point out. I do want to engage with Joe's point here. Joe feels like his point's been lost, so I want to engage with that. But Sprouticus, go ahead, get your point out. Don't worry. we'll get you.
It's going to include what Bam and Joe both said. So, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, high school had a concussion rate of 10.4 per 10,000 athlete exposures. So the rate during practice was 5.01 per 10,000 athlete exposures, compared with the competition concussion rate of 35.82 per 10,000 athlete exposures. So overall, football had a concussion rate of 10.4 per 10,000 exposures. This goes towards what Joe is saying when he says he wants it to be aggregated. This study is aggregated, and this goes towards what Bam is saying, to where it is not 20%. It is 10.4 per 10,000.
Which would equate to what, 1%?
Yes.
That's one, and I don't even know if that number's right. I'm just saying that like these numbers are so across the board, and the 15% one, it just is ridiculous.
It's not.
I think 1% is
not
also
1%.
probably ridiculous.
That's not 1%.
10,000?
It's not
it's a rate.
1%.
It's like
It's a rate per every single practice. That is the chance that you will get a concussion
Wait a minute.
on one day of practice or one day of
practice.
a competition.
Hold on.
I don't think
Let's
that's
pull.
what it said.
No,
It's an
that's
exposure
let's pull that.
rating.
Let's pull that back, because how much time would you want then? How much time would you want? Is 15 minutes per week too much for you?
No, I'm not going to go further and further down when you're trying to run away from the argument,
Is
which
15
you refuse to answer.
15 minutes of tackling and thudding per week, is that too much for you? During practice.
You're asking
so during
me
an entire week of practice,
Joe,
you're only allowed. You are only allowed. You are only allowed.
You're being a sleazy little fuck right now.
You were only
You
allowed.
ran away.
You were only allowed.
You ran away.
Hey, stop it. Wait. Okay, you had the floor. I want to give Scott the floor. Lactoid is waiting though. Lactoid, I want to get Lactoid's point. And Joe, I'm going to engage with your point here because I think you have an interesting point. I really want to focus on it, so don't worry. We're going to get to that. But Scott, respond how you want to respond, then Lactoid, and then I really want to engage with what Joe is trying to say.
My response is that there are things that you can do to make it better. But if you want to start trying to obfuscate and run away from the question and move over to like specific training techniques, etc., because you don't want to talk about the prevalence rate of concussions in the population, and then you want to deny any data that doesn't match with your anecdotal experience, then I don't give a fuck about you not having the data available of prevalence rates with certain techniques versus other techniques. I'm okay with making it better. But the problem is what is the prevalent rate of concussions? And if the prevalence rate of concussions is such that 10, 15, 20% of people are getting a fucking concussion every season, and then you reiterate that towards multiple seasons, you have a very large percentage of people that are getting long-term damaging traumatic brain injuries that can lead to horrible fucking things. And we can get into aggregating, figuring out what those things are, reducing those until it's at an acceptable rate. But you're going towards the things we can do to reduce the rate while ignoring the rate because me love football and you're not allowed to talk shit on football. And it's bullshit and it's cowardly.
He's going towards
May I address it, Prime, or do you want to?
I promise you. We just want to get to Lactoid. You're going to have that spot, Lactoid.
So, I mean, just because Joe was specifically referred to, Joe, if you want to swap places and I'll go after you, I can do that if you want.
Okay,
I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that. What I want is an expand, and this is probably the lactose. Listen, I use the R word a lot there. I got a little heated there. Sorry about that, Lactoid and Corey. Usually I'm on Corey's side here. We're on opposite sides. It's fun. This is what I want, to be very direct here, because apparently me love football. Whatever. Fucking. All right. So I want the expansion of research on concussions. I also want the expansion of health procedures around concussions and around contact sports, period. I want both happening at the same time, because we understand that the sport is not going to stop. We understand that the sport is not going to stop. I'll say it one more time for those people in the back of the room who are, we don't want to stop, we hate football. You can't stop football. What you have to do is make sure that you're putting students in a position to be safe from the participating in this activity. This is why I want the expansion of research while limiting the time of tackling and thudding. I want the expansion of research while we had the mandatory screenings of players on Thursdays or Friday, depending on the game for participation. This is why I want the mandatory 2 concussion rule. If you have 2 concussions in a 2-year period when you're in high school, you're out of the sport altogether. Like, these are things that I want, all the while the expansion of research. That way, it makes people's arguments of like, hey, I want to ban football in certain aspects stronger. But again, like, I also want, while we're walking and chewing gum at the same time and expanding concussion research and expanding how hits cause certain injuries, I want certain things that we know cause harm out of the game. I want kickoffs out. I want using your equipment as a weapon penalized so hard to the point that it's fining or pulling the kid out of your program. Like, I want to make something that's incredibly clear. I love football, but I'm way more authoritarian than I think even Bam is. I'm USADA on steroids. I like, there's so many regulations that I want for that sport that every single like beer drinking, loving, tooting American would call it the PFL, the Pussy Football League. But listen, if all those pussies don't get brain injuries, I'm for it, man. If they don't get torn ACLs and MCLs and weird injuries, or they don't walk straight, or they look like Brett Favre and don't remember what they do in their own fucking state, I'm for it, you know?
Okay.
All right. So you didn't answer. Got it.
Let me just okay.
That's right. Walk away. Walk away.
I don't,
pussy.
Joe.
It's all good.
Joe, I don't know what point you think I was trying to make. I feel as though a lot of the time here that we spent, the risk of concussion has been in debate, and some sides have been saying it's not that big of a deal, we kind of downplaying it. Some sides have been saying it's a big deal, and I think this may just be an empirically driven question because I was looking at the CDC. I actually found the full study, and I've been reading through it. It's very interesting because the 15% includes physical activities among high schoolers that includes sports teams, but also includes things like skateboarding and other kind of high risk activities. So I was like, okay, maybe that stuff is like raising the percentage injured. But actually, if you limit the study group to just people who play specifically on sports teams, the rates of concussion go up. So if any high schooler who plays on a sports team has a risk of concussion if you play on one sports team, of 16.7%. A risk of concussion. If you play on 2 sports teams, that goes up to 22.9%. If you play on 3 sports teams, that goes up to 30.3%. If you play on none, it's, I think, down below 3%. So it seems to me that playing in a team sport does carry a risk of concussion. Now, Sprout, I know you're saying that your study shows that these concussions may not cause CTE later, and that's perfectly valid when we're talking about the risks here. But what Scott asked was maybe not necessarily having to do with CTE, but if the risk of concussion among high school students is this high, no. So CTE is one thing, but there's also.
I'm not talking about CTE.
Okay.
Do you think I was talking about something?
Do
you think a 16 just for playing on one sports team, which I mean that includes all sports teams, including things like tennis and lacrosse. So I assume that for football it's likely higher than 16.7%, but we can even run with 16.7%. Do you think 16.7% is an acceptable threshold for people getting concussions?
I need more than just the 16%.
I don't think 16.7% is the threshold for concussions.
What threshold do you have?
Again, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, they took account of 4 different football seasons, 2013 to 2018. 4,183 concussions were suffered by high school football players. The football had a rate of 10.4 per 10,000 athlete exposures. An athlete exposure is an injury of any type. So 10.4 per 10,000 injuries by athletes, because this is where the pediatrics would come in. 10.4 per 10,000 injuries of any athlete was a concussion that happened in football. And so no, I would say that 16% is is too high. I would say that this is more aggregated. You are making assumptions based off of data that isn't aggregated. You are trying to push that data to say that it is aggregated, so therefore we have to actually debate against it. Whereas my data is actually aggregated, and it seems to be that both you and Scott don't actually want to argue against my data. You just want to try and push your data and say it's aggregated and try to push that and say, well, there's no way it could be that because look at this percentage. When you're actually not actually willing to debate the actual data that is in
real quick, real quick,
Yeah,
you
please.
lied. You lied real quick. Athlete exposure is, quote, a unit of susceptibility to injury. It is not 10 per 10,000 injuries that are concussions. It's every time you are susceptible to an injury, which is every game, every practice, every time you go to the gym to go lift weights as a form of practice, every time you go to the field, every time you're doing tackling training, etc. So it's not 10 per 10,000 injuries.
Okay.
It's per
Your stat,
unit of
your stat is not
susceptibility.
relevant to lactoid's data.
Yeah, so lactoid, I think I'm understanding what you're throwing here. And maybe we're throwing the same.
Get water.
Maybe we're throwing on the same ball here. All right, yeah, run away, you fucking pussy ass bitch. So like, I think a big thing here for me, and maybe
Will you stop calling me a pussy when you're the one that won't answer fucking rates of susceptibility?
PUSSYBITCH. So I think one of the things that
this is what people do when they have no argument.
I'm just talking to Lactoid, but apparently it can't happen. But okay, he's gone now. But he has those Bluetooth headphones, so he's probably still hearing me. Whatever, gamers, am I right? So one of the things that maybe I can connect the dots here, but when I ask this definitively, right, just to make sure I'm understanding where you're coming from. So was your frustration and kind of what I was engaging with in terms of the percentage of players concussed as it relates to football, or do you want to like re-ask that question one more time?
Yeah, I mean, so my only concern here is, so if a high enough percentage of kids are getting injured doing this thing, and especially if this injury is a concussion, I become less and less okay with it.
Gotcha.
And especially because they can't consent to that risk. And so if what I'm looking at right here, I'm reading right off the CDC website, among students who played on 1, 2, and 3 or more sports teams, the prevalence of reporting having at least one concussion was 16.7%, 22.9%, and 30.3%, respectively, table 2. If it's true that if I'm going to go play in a sports team, I have a 16.2% chance of getting a concussion as a minor, that's deeply concerning, and that needs to be taken seriously. And that's only reported, by the way.
And it's probably underreported.
Okay,
yeah, if
so
it was 16%, I would agree, but I don't.
Yeah, I see the ball you're throwing. So and maybe we agree on this, and maybe that's why.
How the fuck is he? How the fuck is he?
And the thing
just now figuring that out
is an analysis of the areas of activity. So,
which is fair.
Yeah. So because basically this is what I hear, and maybe Bam hears this too. Like 15% of players are concussed, and then it's like, wow, that's a really, maybe I reiterated this before, but I'll make it as clear as I can this time. Like, wow, that's a really high number. But when I'm looking at it in football, is that I'm concerned of the areas of activity where they're happening. So like, if you came to me, that's like 15% of players are getting concussed, and then additionally, within the aggregate of football, there are 15% of players getting concussed, but also there's 50% of players who are experiencing this during kickoffs. And then it's like, okay, let's approach what's going on in kickoffs. But then, like, if we look across all areas of activity, and all of these are higher than, if you want a number from me, I'd say 15% across all of these areas of activity. And just so I'm clear, because people don't understand what the fuck that means by areas of activity in sports, I'm talking about offense, as opposed to an offensive player getting concussed, a defensive player getting concussed, a kickoff receiving team player getting concussed, and a kickoff returning team getting concussed. And if all areas of those are 15% or greater, then that would be something where we would strongly consider reevaluating.
Joe, can I say one more thing real quick? Because it's directly in response to that. I have a proclivity to want to allow this because full disclosure, I am a football fan. I like football. It's fun, right? It's fun to watch. And I think it's good exercise, and I think kids need to be exercising more. Yes. If what you do works, like if we do this full analysis and like, hey, we can get like the rate down below 5% because we set up these special rules for like kickoffs and special teams, great. Like that is the most preferable outcome. But the fact that right now we're sitting on 16.7 at the very least means that we have a lot of work to do in getting that fucking number down, because that number is unacceptable. That number is unacceptable.
And I'd agree with you.
Number.
Like,
that's the point.
like I mean, Bam is at the point of accepting numbers. Like I'm at the point of expansion of the research and the data, because again, like I've seen what these sports do to kids, and it's not very good. But I do recognize that like this is the risk that you do when it comes to physical activity, and we can make the sport safer while researching the areas of activity better, so we can have better data and information, so it's like we can approach this properly. Because again, like one of like my, which is kind of like the turf versus like grass argument for me in one aspect, is that like we see the injuries that happen on turf over and over and over, and that's even something that even at the high school level is underreported. And I can't imagine, like, I mean, like I see what happens in the NFL, where it's like, yeah, like we should probably switch to grass now. And this whole like liberal initiative of like turf is the way to go for multi-access and multi-use of fields, and it's like, come on, who are we lying to? Why are we lying to ourselves like that? But with that being said, to read back to the point, because again, I guess we're in agreement here, and some level of agreement, where it's like 15% is high. I want to see the data distribution across all areas of activity before I want to like evaluate like how we do like sort of the more authoritarian thing of pulling kids out or banning it outright, that type of shit.
I know Corey wants to go. Okay, you can go. And I'll go.
I'm going to try being quick. And maybe just to throw an olive branch to you, Joe, because despite maybe the disagreement, I still love you. Like I can see how there's maybe a diluted version of football that can exist, that children can play, that results in pretty much like very minimal risk of concussion. I have no problem that might be an option. I would just say that, you know, I don't know that I want to run the experiment of like, oh, implement this safety measure, and then let's track the data, and turns out there's minimal effect, and then let's make this little tweak, and then track. You know, we're gonna go through iterative generations of kids running this experiment as like I'm trying to play the safest of like, you know, there's probably way more other sports. As someone who is highly physically active myself, of like there's so many other sports that children can play that just don't pose this risk of injury.
Like soccer.
And I'm an accelerationist. I don't want to be the incremented like check the data. I want to like hit this hammer hard.
It's not what an accelerationist.
So that's why it's like I'm not of this like ban kickoffs and then double check. I'm like, no, ban kickoffs and don't return them. Ban punt returns at certain levels of the field and don't return them. Like ban and this is where probably Bam and I would probably argue about it, where it's like, hey, ban the use of your body as a weapon and make it very clear what that means of using your body as a weapon. So
Joe,
like eating
Scott,
I want
and the beat.
Scott,
I thought Bam needed to go.
Sorry, what?
Oh, sorry.
It's Prime's panel, but I do want to say something.
Well, I know Bam has really been waiting to speak.
Okay, I want. All right, that's fine. Whatever. Go ahead, Bam.
Okay, yeah, I really didn't want to take over. Just something else that interesting I found in that is that women's sports are actually like overall more likely to cause concussions, but men football like has so many members that football has, like men has a higher rate of concussion, and it's just because of one, like I said, one, the level of contact, and two, the number of members participating in it. But I guess because of the way women's bodies are, they have higher rates of concussions in basically every other sport, which is probably also plays into the data of concussions.
Well, I think we also saw that over time the rates
ban these other sports. Like no one's mentioned banning women's tennis or soccer or.
I mean, I haven't mentioned banning football either.
Well, I mean,
I said
we haven't pointed out the problem of it either. And I'm not talking about on this panel. I'm saying like societally. Like I think people have a personal issue with football and football players.
I think they have a personal issue when it comes to football and concussions because probably media attention of CTE, but also because the rates are so much higher. I mean, that's just kind of
that's what I'm saying. It's not
like, you know what I mean? It's like the nail that sticks up is, you know, gets hammered down hardest, right? Like we could talk about soccer, which I think is number 2, but no one talks about soccer because football's the one that is in the media attention, right? we could talk about like Muay Thai or like Taekwondo and like whether or not it should be banned that you're allowed to kick heads. But like the rates are lower in terms of like the rates are actually higher in if you allow head kicks. But the amount of people
in high school boys is actually wrestling, which I wrestled too in high school. But,
right, but
again,
but I think what I was going to say is that when we look at the AAP's data in terms of per athlete exposure, it's actually gone up in games and gone down in training, which might be because we've restricted tackling training. And because of that, they're not tackling as properly. And so during the game where they go full force, they might be getting injured more. We don't really know. But that also could be a factor in what you're saying in terms of like other things is technical ability could lead to less injuries. And, you know, females may not have as much technical capability in terms of the sports that they're playing, but it's probably, we'd have to dig and parse that data out. There's a lot of factors.
Yeah. Basically.
Joe,
Well,
would you
like,
agree
I get
with
real
me?
personal about my sport. Like for instance, Lactoid, like I'm like when it comes to certain running drills in practice and practices, I'm already there limiting that, right? Because like I'm so sensitive about ACL tears and MCL tears. So that's like another thing in terms of like contact that I want to expand. And that's where Bam and I probably disagree because I consider running contact. So it's like
so Joe, but here's my concern, right? So
and they're at
running
the,
is not
be clear, I say
contact.
that because we're at the 15 to 20% of like games played where there's ACL tears. Like
sure.
It's too high.
So you bring that up.
That's not contact, but okay.
Well, right, but
I consider running contact.
Okay, so
how?
You bring up the
It's
ACL,
not two human bodies contact.
All right, I want to talk to Lactoid now. Thanks.
It doesn't matter. It's an injury while playing the sport.
What?
Okay, so I told you the stats on the concussions that I've been reading.
Doesn't
You're
make
talking
any
about ACL
sense.
tears and all the various other injuries that can happen. I'm glad that you want to reform this, and where I'm sitting now is it should be reformed, but as it stands right now, absent this reformation, if I'm a parent and I'm going to choose whether or not to allow my kid to participate in this stuff, unless these changes happen, how can I in good conscience send my kid into something where they have an unacceptably high % chance of a concussion, of an ACL tear, of other injuries when they're my kid and I'm responsible for their safety?
Yeah, that's a great point because I want to ban contact from 8th grade down. I want it to be like that. That's just where I'm at. Where the only like limitation, if people aren't down, because I know there's somebody in the sports world that's like, what the fuck is Joe talking about? How are they going to learn how to tackle? You can still have thudding, my guy. Like, relax. Where like my big thing is making sure that children and young adults are learning how to tackle properly. And when you have any type of vehicle where their body can be used as a weapon, they're going to use it as a weapon in context. They're going to use it as a weapon in terms of retaliation. They're going to use it in terms of a means of defense. Because like I've seen this happen in real time. Like you'll have like somebody who just like hits you on one play a little weird, and then the next play you knock them out of the game. And that's like not something that I want. I want to take that out of the culture of contact sports and specifically in football. And I think the only way to do that from like 8th grade down is to ban tackling, period. And then when they're finally in a regulatory environment, because youth sports aren't regulated, then you can finally do things at the high school level where there's regulated in a way that's safe, which incentivizes coaches to properly teach these things. And this is already happening. Obviously in youth sports, it's going to be a little bit more challenging because this is way unregulated over there. But
no, let me be clear. Joe, I'm talking about high school students. I'm talking about like if I had a kid who was in high school and they came up.
Dude, he's been running from.
I play football.
I can't
see how I could say yes. Looking at the data as it stands now.
Well,
why?
I'd say yes. Like I would say yes, and here's why I would say yes: is because I am not retarded. If I'm going to put my I'm going to put my child into an activity. And I'm going to treat that activity with seriousness and care. I'm going to have a conscious, dedicated effort to know that sport better than them walking into it. So if they want to play football, I'm going to be like, okay, what do you want to do as far as the sport is concerned? So if my child has an interest in football, it's not you playing football isn't the be all end all of playing football. So if my child wants to say, like, if he's a wide receiver and he's not cutting it, you can laugh. Like, you can laugh if you want at this, but
No,
I
I'm
think
laughing at what you said before. Like,
yeah.
I would, because I am not. It's like,
Well, yeah, well, like,
I don't think I am either.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. Like, but I guess like the frustration that I have, and this is why I said I'm not retarded, is that a lot of parents will put their children into an activity and just think that putting their student into the activity is enough for them to be engaged and enough for them kind of like as a pseudo babysitter. Where I'm at the point where I want parents to be actively involved in the activities that they're putting their children in so they can understand what's happening to their children in real time. So like for me as a parent, if I know my son is concussed and I know the signs of concussion and my son says, "Dad, I'm good, I feel good, it's just my back," I'm like, "My nigga, get in the car, we're going the fuck home." And I'm gonna tell the coach, "You better not start his ass. If I start his ass, we're gonna have a fucking problem."
But he's already concussed. He's already concussed, and if he tears his ACL, like he might say, "Look, I've turned from my ACL. Don't put me in." And I might be a great parent and say, like, "Yeah, I'm not going to put you back in," but your ACL's torn.
So are you against all sports? Like, are you gonna stop your kid from skateboarding? You're gonna stop your kid from mountain biking? Are you?
I guess
where do you draw the line to where, you know what, this is too dangerous for my kid? I need to wrap him in bubble wrap and make sure that my kid has like limited to no risk of injury.
Yeah. So on a
At
case,
what point?
I would treat it. Yeah. So what I would do is on a case by case basis, like take a look at this. How dangerous is this, right? And if it's within acceptable risk levels for me as a parent, I would be like,
risk level? I
don't know exactly. I haven't sat down and thought about it for every single activity where the exact line
you
is.
fence sitter, plant your flag.
I do know. I plant this flag. I do know that if my kid came to me and wanted to engage in an activity, which they were 16.7% likely to get a concussion, and somewhat like what you're saying, Joe, like had like some percentage chance, like you think he said the word 20 or something, could be around there, percentage chance of like an ACL tear or something along these lines that causes like severe injury, I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say you come back to me with a lower number.
Yeah, I mean, I'll come back to you with a lower number. The most least injured athletes that are in the NFL are kickers and punters. So there's other options on the field.
Yeah, if they want to be a kicker, maybe I'll be okay with that. But
you can say then that's an option as a parent. It's like, okay, you're gonna play football. Okay, you're a kicker, and they're gonna be like, "Dad, what? I don't want to be a kicker." And it's like, my brother in Christ, do you want to make $6 to $10 million, or maybe really in the 2 to 3, kicking a ball for up to 20 years? And you can play like
and want to be in kickers. Like it's like a skill you can develop. You don't
with a swim team, that'd be great.
Right? Yeah, but I'm saying let's
drown. Let's look up the stats.
Yeah.
Like,
oh my god!
I'm making the kicker argument because like the reason why I make like the kicker argument, which is a half meme every time I use it, is that like one of the frustrations that I do have with sports is that parents are lied to, and that like you have to be playing football in order to be participating in football. For fuck's sake, Bill Belichick never played football. He never played. He is just a coach.
I'm not against football. I don't care if my kids want to be like a football fan or want to go like sit in the fan, like watch games or do what the fuck ever, right? What I'm concerned about, what I think every parent should be concerned about, is whenever their kid comes to them and wants to do an activity and like the risk is high. Like if your kid came to you and was like, "I want to go motocross racing," would you be like?
I teach him how to motocross. I teach it's my duty. It's my, and this might be just a parenting difference. It's my duty.
What if they're 14? What if they're 14 and they want to go motocross racing?
It's my duty as a parent to know the activity better than them, and I assume the risk with them. So I'm going to learn the sport with them. I'm going to learn the activity with them, because that's what I signed up for as a parent. It's not my job to say like, okay, you want to do motocross? All right, let's get you started. It's like, no, we're going to do this a responsible way so you can enjoy this activity. I'm going to be along the way with you the entire time, and we're going to do this together. That's just where I'm at in terms of parenting.
Yeah, my 14-year-old is not doing motocross.
Lactoid, would you be okay with your kid playing soccer?
If I would set the rule that was set for me, which is no headers whatsoever.
20% ACL tears, my friend.
Yeah, so I have to look at that. Yeah, I don't know.
Soccer has the second most concussions behind football. It has more ACL tears than football. So I'm curious on where exactly you're gonna set this line, because it seems to be a line that's ever moving. So if they're not allowed to play soccer, then are they allowed? Are they allowed? What sport are they allowed to play? What sport is safe enough for you to think that it's okay for them to have bubble wrap on? That they're gonna be okay, and that, you know what, I'm gonna wrap my kid in bubble wrap and make sure that they never get injured,
Okay.
even based off their own,
Okay,
even based on themselves. Because you can
wait.
even, wait,
Wait,
please,
I've
please,
heard the
please,
point.
wait,
Let,
please.
let him finish. Let him finish.
You can go as far as to say mountain biking. There's plenty of injuries that happen in mountain biking because your bike will fall off the trail. That happens. It's happened to me multiple times. So you can say that, go as far as mountain biking. Like, what sport is safe enough for your kid?
Okay, so I am the only one so far that has been saying that I don't exactly know where the line is. Okay, you can
Not like
create
me.
you can create absurdums that go one way, where you're saying, well, look at this sport like soccer or tennis. There's like, look at these risks, and I can agree. Like, obviously, there's some threshold of risk that I would be not okay with, but there's also thresholds of risk that you would not be okay with. And I could ask you the same question: where's your line? Are you okay with your kid doing motocross?
Yeah,
They're
Black
14. Are you
Can
okay with your kid doing fucking, go-karting down the Grand Canyon with like, a random bomb in their car that might go off in 30 seconds, but also might not, right? Like, I don't, like, you can set up any fucking crazy shit if you want to.
Well,
There's risks for
Not
everything.
saying
I
crazy
agree.
shit, I'm bringing up statistics.
And I'm saying that at
We-
some point, like, I'm going to draw a line. And one of the lines here seems like football, from what I've been looking at and what Joe's been saying and what I've been looking at, fucking like concussion ratings and shit. That scares me. That is an uncomfortably high percentage. Are there other sports that may have a percentage that's not so uncomfortably high? Sure. I might look at that and I might say, I be careful. Like, I'm still going to be like there. I'm going to be watching. I'm going to like make sure you're not going to get hurt. But maybe it's not going to be so high that I'm not going to let you do it, because ultimately it's always going to be a call that the parent has to make.
And so
Yeah,
to that point,
and
Lacto, can I ask? So this addresses you and Sprouticus, and brings in Lacto. What he's saying, like, would you be okay with your child Joe like free soloing? Same with you, Sprouticus, like free
Yes.
soloing. Okay.
Free
You want
soloing, I don't know what the hell that is.
No.
I will never say no to my child in an activity they want to do for the betterment of themselves, because my job as a parent is to make sure they're a better individual than me. So, like, if they want to do certain activities and certain sports that they feel that they just want to do because they love, I'm going to learn it with them 100%. I'm never going to put my child in a situation where I'm not within the activity with them,
You're
because
going
as
to learn
much as
free
they
soloing with them?
Is that
So
like
what's free
skydiving?
soloing? Can someone explain? Can you
I
explain to
don't
me,
know
Corey,
what it
what's
is.
free
So
soloing?
that is literally rock climbing without any safety whatsoever.
Yeah,
No, I would-
because
no, I would not allow my kid to free solo, no.
Corey, you're doing the Canadian thing where like Canadians will like extrapolate a thing. You think that's like the place where people start, where it's like, oh, like we're like, and I'm saying that like where I'm
That's
going.
what I was doing.
Well, yeah,
I'm saying I would not allow.
Sprout.
I'm saying I would not allow my kid to free solo. I would make sure
I'm
they
saying
had
I
safe.
would.
I would make sure they had safety.
Where's your
equipment.
line?
Wait, stop. I'm gonna explain where my line is. I'm gonna explain where my line is. I'm going to let my kid do what they feel like they want to do. At the same time, I'm going to make sure that they have the safety equipment to make whatever they want to do, whatever they feel passionate about. Because I'm not going to stop a kid that has
Free
passion.
soloing?
So what? Can you give me 1 second? I would
You don't
appreciate that,
start
Corey.
with free
So
soloing.
can you give me 1 second? So I would make sure I wouldn't stop my kid's passion. I would make sure my kid's able to fulfill their passion, be able to do what they want to do. But I would also make sure that they have the much safety as possible for that event. So for example, for climbing, right? Then I would say, no, you're not going to free solo. You're going to have the safety equipment that you need to be able to climb. And that would be that. If they eventually got to the point to where free soloing was an actual possibility, to where they could actually think about free soloing, more than likely they'd be above the age of 18, because I haven't really heard of kids underneath 18 free soloing.
Yeah, because that's some white people shit.
But
No,
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 I would make sure they had safety
I can
equipment.
address that point.
Oh,
Like,
wait, I don't want you to address that point. I
like we can reckon like we can do this for any like activity. Like
we're just
see,
switching
like,
up the conversation from
Yeah.
like the conversation started from like something that you went from like banning something that like other parents can't willingly like consent to participate with their children doing something, to saying, would you personally allow your child to do this one thing? Actually don't care if Lactoid doesn't want his child to play football.
Yeah,
I
I'm with
care
that.
that Lactoid doesn't want my child to play football. I
Yeah.
think that's
But there is a level of risk though that I think it becomes incumbent on us to stop other kids from doing it. So one example I can think of is, despite all the safety equipment, and despite if they really have a passion for it and they really want to, we're not letting 14-year-olds join the military and go fight people and shoot at people and get shot at, because that has a risk that is unacceptable for a 14-year-old, right? And so there's some threshold that we all say no, right? I assume.
I'd still teach my kid how to shoot.
Is the military a sport?
It's not.
Why does that look surprising?
Why
does it look so surprising that
so
was
we're
a
talking
surprise?
about sports, and you bring up the military. It's not a sport.
Yeah, like we have thresholds for certain things where we understand why we don't like do these things. You know, like I think that's why
that's the only thing I'm trying to establish. Okay.
Well, right, like that's why the 14-year-old free soloing.
I think 16.7% concussion is a little bit too high. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm
if we had better data, then like we would have a conversation. I just don't think that need currently exists.
I
roll
need
the dice.
Like the hard truth.
I need better data, but again, I'm of the camp where I want to go harder in terms of regulations on the sport itself. Like,
okay, all right. So
you're basically saying it's roll the dice.
You did it, Prime. You talked about football. Good job.
Yeah, good job.
I wanted
with people who don't know about the sport. It's A+, but it's okay. It's okay. Some people want to read about like just use big words and have yellow and black in their background, and then
dialectic.
Dialectic. Mark, this is just we have to have the critical analysis of the button. It's like, God damn, bro, go outside. Raise your kids. I don't know what to tell you.
Oh man,
I was libertarian.
So mad he can't have an argument.
No, it's just that I've never liked you, so it's like I'm not gonna be nice to you. So, but it's cool. We're on a panel together. It's all right. We can move past that.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, I'm just gonna have to leave it. Leave it there, guys.
I love how he just admits that he's just being a petty bitch.
Where you sitting at home may be involved. So stick around for that. The content does not end. It never ends. It never ends. Especially with social and chat for social media. First of all, hit the follow button on this channel. If you haven't done so yet, been enjoying this content, we'd love to have you. Twitter is where you'll find tweets. Discord, again, that's where the open panel is going to be. I want you to be part of it and just be a part of the community. TikTok and then YouTube is where you find the VODs. Like, comment, and subscribe. Okay, I'm going to give an outro out to all these great individuals. Then we'll move on. But remember, content doesn't end, so no need to head out. We'll start with, unless I get tired, maybe. Keep the stream on. We'll start with Bam. Bam, thanks for coming on. Bam is one of the people who he's just been a great guest I can count on. So it was great to have you here on the Reverie. We usually don't have you. Thanks for coming on. It was really great.
Yeah, no, I did, and like I said, I did enjoy the conversation, regardless of the fact that I was also like super frustrated. No, I think that it is a difficult conversation to have with like a difficult conversation with there's a lot of nuances. Like I said, I think we need better data. I think I agree with Joe. We also need to aggregate why things are happening, because like I said, if you do have any type of relationship with sports, like it is true when these types of things happen, related to kickoffs and like special teams. But in general, yeah, I had a really good time. Y'all, I was gonna tell y'all to follow me, but don't follow me. Stay away. I'm a loner.
Thanks so much, friend. Okay.
Oh, snap! Last thing. I'm sorry. I'm moving on. Prime. That One Piece chapter though, crazy.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. You know what? I was thinking after that.
God.
Blame me. I was like, I need to hit up Bam. Like, we need to just sit down and talk. All right.
Let's.
Motherfuckers really advocate. Motherfuckers really advocate against statehood and just don't want to crack down on weeds.
Joe, don't break up the black community. It was doing so well.
Damn.
I'll divide it. I'll divide it hard. Man, I'll divide it harder than LBJ, my friend. When it comes to weeds.
We will. Oh my God, you're the worst. Joe.
I'll
Yeah.
separate but equal the shit out of weaves, bro.
DM me,
Like,
please. DM me, please. Like when you're available, like, and I'll just chill with you. I would really like to talk about it. All right. Next, we have Scott. Scott, thank you also for coming. It's amazing. Like, Scott, I thought you.
What's good?
It was a good conversation, and I didn't the second topic. I did not expect you to take that stance. I would not have thought you would do that. So it's interesting to see you on that side, and back to back with Corey fighting the good fight. That was amazing. So
Giving away one small time.
yeah.
Long
So
story short, I'm not letting my kid play football. Fuck out of here with that. Not until you fix those rates, because I'm willing to admit there is a threshold, and and say that 16% is way too fucking.
And I was very happy to hear from you, and when you take an unexpected stance, I think those are one of the best streams, right? Because then I don't know what's gonna happen.
Shit.
Thank you again, Scott.
Yeah, so I am Scott from Fabian Liberty. Sorry, my voice is a little hoarse. Changing seasons, it happens. Anarcho-capitalist duo stream. We do a little bit of everything in politics space. But Thursday, come check us out. Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern. We will have Blair White, Taftash, Shapeshifter or Shifter of Shapes, and Tulipar, two fairly well-known D-trans people, as well as I think everybody knows who Blair White is, and Taftash if you're on Twitch. And we may or may not have Buck Angel, just depend on his stream, on his schedule. So just talking about questioning gender and what it's like to be a trans person, and a lot more conservative opinions of individuals that have experienced it. So it should be a fun panel. Come check it out.
Thank you. All right, let's go. Everything's moved on my screen, so let's go to our friend Corey. Corey as well has been great. And again, another person I can always really rely on. So I appreciate having you here. You put up a great fight today, Corey. I'd love to see it.
I tried to do a little bit less fence sitting on the second topic. Stake out my position. As always, super grateful to be here. I always love being here. And despite the slight disagreement with Joe, I still love Joe. And again, I totally can see that there's probably a version of football that can exist, that there's just minimal risk of injury or concussion, but it's probably just like, it's probably I think some people would say it's no longer football at that point. As in, I'd probably just maybe to be the safest, it's just like flag football, and that's just how it's got to be. But I think pretty much most people would be against it. Like, that's not football, that's a perverted version of football. I'm Corey Campbell. Oh, and I also definitely love my fellow Canadian Lactoid and Sprouticus, and definitely love you, Prime, as always. Appreciate the invitation. I'm Corey Campbell. You can find me on twitch.tv, CoreyCampbell84, and on Twitter and Instagram, literally, it's Corey Campbell.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. Next, we have our local naturalized Canadian intelligence agent. Let's go to our friend Lactoid. Lactoid. Thank you as well. This was a really good fight from you too. I really enjoyed it. You were tossing some blows out there.
Thank you for having me, Prime. I think I agree with Scott here. I don't know if I would let my kid play football. I guess it would depend also on how naturally large they are as a person. I'll make the decision when the time comes. Okay.
How tall are you?
I'm 6'2". So.
You're shitting out 6-footers, my friend. You better be careful. You better make sure your partner ain't 5'8", or that's 6'5" automatic.
Okay. So anyway, I'll decide when the time comes. I think I like basketball more anyway, so hopefully I'll push them towards that. First topic, don't trade with China, don't trade with any communists. And I think it's a great segue into who I am. If you like what I had to say, you can find me on Anti-Communism United on Discord and Twitch, and then on Twitter at Anti-Com-United. Again, thank you, Prime, for having me on. Thank you for everybody who debated with me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yo, this song's got a bit
feel
of
free
a
to put
vibe to it.
especially your Discord link, so that people can find you there, right? I don't know if anyone from my chat want to go there, right? We love our communists here,
But
right?
pro-communism united, all the way.
Yeah.
Corey Campbell, PCU.
Let's go to our friend Sproticus. Sproticus, thanks for coming through and sharing some of those personal stories. I'm honestly sorry that you're having that knee pain that's apparently for life. But yeah, thank you for sharing experiences.
No, you're good. It's just it's stuff that the ability to back out in the field needs to be taken out of the player's hands. Because me and anyone else who's played sports knows how hard it is for the player to give up on their team and say that they can't go back out in the field. And so it needs to be taken out of the player's hands, it needs to be taken out of the coach hands. It needs to be left to a neutral party that's going to be able to fairly diagnose what's going on. And to just bring a little bit of more stats in, according to the National Library of Medicine, concussions for 15 to 24 years old are sports is second only to motor vehicle crashes, so it's more dangerous concussion-wise to ride or drive a motor vehicle than it is to play sports. And concussions represented 8.9% of all high school athletic injuries. And so that is including football and any other sport. And so I think that proves to show that a couple of the stats were over guesstimating how many actually injuries considered as the Library of Medicine, but
Dude, what the fuck is he talking? Dude, he
I
literally has.
I love talking to everybody.
Oh
here.
my god.
So
Sproticus.
yeah, if you liked what I had to say, go follow me at Sproticus on Twitch and Twitter. But other than that, guys, I'm excited.
These fucking takes. Holy shit.
Thank you.
8% injuries are concussions. That proves that like concussions are overblown.
But Joe,
what?
Like all the time, if you've watched this channel, if you've seen Joe here, Joe on multiple occasions, whenever he sees the slightest chance to do so, will try to turn a topic into sports,
or derail it, or completely derail the topic. I'm very good at that.
Exactly.
Shout out to lollipops and pedophiles.
So I finally wanted to give him a chance. Again, when I thought of this topic, I gotta invite Joe, and I was really surprised when he said yes. But this was his chance. I wanted him to finally get it all out there. I hope you enjoyed that then, Joe.
Yeah, I did. It sucks that it comes from a topic of somebody having probably permanent brain damage. But it was still a fun topic. And honestly, I think that like Corey and I told myself, I think we're all kind of close to sort of certain premises of it, right? Where it's like we want to make the best decisions for our children when they enter into these activities. If they want to enter into these activities, it's our responsibility to make sure they make the best informed decision about what they do. I haven't really like elaborated on my sports takes, so like I'm a little authoritarian when it comes to football, mainly because I think that the NFL especially is in the business of lying to parents about, and lying to children too, really good at lying to children about like what is possible in the sport, where like not every single kid is going to be a wide receiver, like a wide receiver in the NFL, but there's a lot of other positions and a lot of other things you can do in these activities that doesn't involve being on the field. And I think that one of the things that the NFL could do, and this is true,
we were mostly talking about high school stats,
is revealing the work opportunities that exist.
16% is the high school stat,
and showing that there's a clear correlation between like
probably closer to 20
on the sideline as like an offensive coordinator, offensive assistant to the offensive coordinator, assistant to the defensive coordinator, assistant to the coach, that could lead to a very profitable and cushy career within the activity. Which is what other data was showing. It's 1 in 5 per season. I don't know. I'm very pro sports medicine. I'm very pro like going into sports as a means of a profession. But I'm very like strict on these things. Like, I mean, we didn't get to it, Lactoid. Like, I'm gonna limit the number, or even Core 2. Like, I'm gonna limit the number of players allowed on high school teams. Like, period. Yeah. Where it's ridiculous to me that
CDC have, like, says it's 16% for sports in general.
Half of you kids
when you look at
AAP
AAP
in the marching band, because everybody
AOP
starts
data,
in that. And you can also like go a
probably
whole
closer to
career
1 in
without
5.
getting injured in marching band, and then go on to do like you can join the military and do music. That pays really fucking well. That's my non-righty take.
ACL
I'm
tears
very
suck,
pro-military when it
and
comes
it
to
is
marching
permanent
to
damage,
musicians.
but like
very
it's
pro-military.
nothing compared to
Oh,
multiple
I,
TBIs.
I
But
am.
listen,
It's an odd
I
right.
still
I
love you,
am-
Joe. I still
yeah,
love you.
it's trust me. My community hates it when I talk about the army and
I
simp
am
for the military
glad-
vets.
I
Joe,
am
don't
glad
you-
that Joe has reignited my dream of being an NFL water boy. All right, it's on the
Bobby
table
Boucher?
now. Yeah,
you-
Bobby
Also,
Boucher,
maybe-
it was a great movie. It was a great movie.
Don't you
And-
immediately,
I
don't
loved
don't
it.
you immediately become
I
a
cried, I
sergeant
think.
if you join the band for the army? Don't you like
They-
immediately
they-
become a sergeant?
For the audition groups, they treat you nice. They treat you nice.
Yeah,
Like they
I'm-
treat you nice.
I had a friend that was a Marine band. It's fucking dope.
I'm almost positive you immediately become a sergeant if you join
And
the
then you
band,
come out,
like
and then when you like you ever
Yeah,
see
you're an
those
E5.
like
Yeah.
you ever see those like army propaganda where it's like it's the dude on the edge that has like has the fatigues on, and then it's the little kid who's looking at him like, wow, he's so inspiring. And in the back of his mind is like, nigga, I played the flute for 4 years and now I'm an army vet. He doesn't need to know that shit. Like,
Joe,
he goes out there in Iraq, fucking just like
Joe-
catering to Rob North's talking points. Meanwhile, you got some nigga on playing for Obama and other fucking presidents. Like,
I
Joe,
almost did check.
I'm almost. It's either that or it's the guy that's at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers, to where he just does the
trumpet guy. Oh,
the
the
rifle
bugle.
ship and does
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
it's there's like I'm pro jobs when it comes to music in the military. And then also, I guess the last thing, and then I'll shut the fuck up. Make ADOS a recognized legal racial category. If you want to fight with that on Thursday, we can fight on that on Thursday.
Oh my god, I would love to. So, if only this military band thing sounds amazing. If only I had a thing called talent. But you know that's why I'm here on Twitch.
Tell that to the
Right,
people
so
who play
we
in those
will-
bands.
We will continue on to open walk on panel right after this. If anybody here wants to join, we'd love to have you, but if not, that's okay. Thanks for bringing your time, your energy, your knowledge, and your passion for my community. I know they appreciate you just as much as I do. Have a good one. Goodbye.
Always great.
Take
Bye.
care.
You just watched a clip from our Twitch channel, Fabian Liberty. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe here on YouTube, or go ahead and give us a follow on twitch.tv/Fabian Liberty.